Chapter 829. It wasn't until the T-Rex's breath, filled with the stench of blood, blew into Qidian's nose did it realize that things were completely different from what it had imagined. In an instant it had fallen into the most dangerous situation. At this moment, the T-Rex opened its jaws again and bit down at lightning speed, intending to deal a fatal blow to the second player. "Gohan, save me!" At this critical moment, Qidian's weakness as a woman was completely revealed. Well, in fact, even if it was a man, he would probably cry for help at this moment. "Whoa!" Qidian clearly felt 7 or 8 sharp teeth piercing its body. Just as these teeth were about to crush its bones, the T-Rex suddenly let out a painful howl, then took a few steps back and spat out Qidian. "Gohan!" Qidian struggled to raise its head from the ground and saw Gohan holding the Juzi sword. The tip of the sword pierced through the T-Rex's lower jaw and deep into the T-Rex's throat. No wonder the T-Rex would let out a painful howl and then spit out Qidian that was already in its mouth. "Awo!" The T-Rex frantically shook its head, wanting to throw Gohan and the Juzi sword out. The T-Rex indeed achieved its goal. Gohan flew out with the Juzi sword. However, Gohan did not fall to the ground. Instead, he made a beautiful turn in the air and landed on the trunk of a nearby tree. "Come back!" Gohan stretched out his hand and Qidian turned into a stream of light and returned to Gohan's hand, turning back into the Juzi sword. Gohan carefully looked at Qidian's data and discovered that although Qidian's personal shield had been destroyed, the damage to its durability was not high. It only lost about 10% of its original durability. This surprised Gohan. The Sword Maiden's durability was only 1/4 of the damage it could withstand. Meanwhile, the Tyrannosaurus Rex was able to shatter Qidian's shield with a single bite. Logically speaking, it should be able to reduce Qidian's durability to 1% with a single bite. However, Starting Point had only lost less than 10% of its durability. It seemed like Starting Point's durability was even higher than personal shields. However, thinking about it carefully, when forging Starting Point, he had added a total of 3 God-level materials. It seemed like it was normal for its durability to be higher. After all, Starting Point had the potential to become an Emperor Sword. Gohan wanted to carefully study the issue of Qidian's durability, but this T-Rex did not intend to give Gohan such a chance. With blood gushing out of its throat, it charged towards the towering tree that Gohan was standing on like a tank. Then, its entire body slammed into the tree, forcefully knocking the tree down along with its root. The tree was so thick that it would take 3 people to wrap their arms around it. Chance. It was also at this moment that Gohan noticed that the Tyrannosaurus Rex's head paused for a moment when it hit the tree trunk. This was probably because the Tyrannosaurus Rex's head was also a little dizzy from the impact. In fact, this pause was not long, about 0.5 seconds. However, 0.5 seconds was enough. The moment the tree was knocked down, Gohan leaped down like a bullet. The blade of the Qidian drew a beautiful arc beside the T-Rex's chin. Then, a dimensional vortex appeared beside the Tyrannosaurus Rex, sucking in the lively Tyrannosaurus Rex, who had not suffered much damage, back into its original world. It was also at this moment that Gohan's points jumped, increasing by a whole 3,000 points. Amazing! Even Gohan, who had expected this scene, couldn't help but be dumbfounded when he saw the T-Rex, which was almost at full HP, being sucked back by the dimensional vortex. This was a Meteor Yuan-Ko with full HP, but it was returned to the dimensional vortex just because Gohan grasped its fatal flaw. If the opponent was a Universe-level Yuan-Ko, although with the combat ability of a Universe-level Yuan-Ko, it would be impossible for a famed sword-level Gohan to touch his node when the Universe-level Yuan-Ko was fully focused on protecting his node. However, the problem was that a Universe-level Yuan-Ko didn't know how to protect his node. In fact, Yuan-Ko didn't even know the existence of his node. It could be guaranteed that a high-level Yuan-Ko wouldn't deliberately protect his node during a battle. This gave Gohan a great opportunity. As long as a universe-level Yuan Ko didn't protect his node, Gohan was confident that he could hit his node. This way, even if a universe-level Yuan Ko was at full HP, he would still have to return to the dimensional vortex and say goodbye to this world. Universe-level Yuan Ko. Gohan suddenly sneered. Should I take the initiative to play with them? With this thought, Gohan couldn't wait to find a universe-level Yuan Ko to test his idea. He wanted to see if he could launch a fatal sneak attack against a universe-level Yuan Ko who didn't know how to defend his node. He wanted to use the power of a famed sword-level sword wielder to send a powerful universe-level Yuan Ko on his way. Unfortunately, in this temporary instance created by Tomono Kakashi, the highest level Yuan Ko was only a meteor-level Yuan Ko. A universe-level Yuan Ko didn't exist. Jina-chan, can you tell me where the nearest meteor-level Yuan Ko gathering point is? Since he couldn't use a universe-level Yuan Ko to practice, Gohan could only settle for the next best thing, which was to find a meteor-level Yuan Ko. There is a group of 9 Tyrannosaurus Rex 23 kilometers southwest of you. Takana Kakashi replied in a straightforward manner. So cool. Our Lord Ling's points have already exceeded 65,000, and she's still far ahead. The host was explaining in high spirits, and the camera was facing Liuyan Ling. Liuyan Ling was floating in the air with her eyes closed, and her palms were gently pressed down. Beside Liuyan Ling, there were thin and sharp lights that were like strands of hair. The rays of light were like swords, and they hovered silently around Ling fleeting time. On the battlefield in the distance, there were thousands of light swords flying up and down, and in the middle of these light swords, there was a group of demonic armored pigs that had fallen into despair. Although these demonic armored pigs were all dragon-level Yuan Ko, from their names, one could tell that their main combat power came from their armor. They sacrificed their attack power in exchange for a stronger defense. The armor on their skin could reach the defense of a nether-level Yuan Ko after they were infused with magic. Many famed sword-level swordbearers would not be able to deplete more than half of their HP after fighting the demonic armored pigs for half an hour. Therefore, the demonic armored pigs were considered to be extremely terrible Yuan Ko in the swordbearers' memos. Although these demonic armored pigs were unlikely to kill them, the long process of killing them was enough to make most famed sword-level sword-bearers give up on the idea of fighting them. They would rather fight with Yuan Ko, whose attack power was 2 or even 5 times stronger than theirs, than waste time with the demonic armored pigs. But now, this group of more than 30 demonic armored pigs were squeezed together helplessly like babies. Their eyes were filled with fear, and the armor on their bodies was emitting an extreme black light. This meant that these demonic armored pigs had already infused all their magic into their skin, and at the same time, they had activated the defense of their armor to its greatest state. But even so, these armor could not defend against the attacks of the light swords floating in the air. The moment these light swords pierced into the demonic armored pig's skin, they sank deep into the demonic armored pig's bodies. The demonic armored pig that was struck by the light swords seemed to have been scalded by a soldering iron. It began to jump around crazily, its eyes filled with pain and despair. It was as if its entire body was being burned. Once the demonic iron-armored pig broke away from the protection of the herd of pigs due to the pain, the remaining light spots floating in the air would immediately pierce into the demonic iron-armored pig's body. According to the audience's careful calculations, it would only take about 32 light swords to kill a demonic iron-armored pig with astonishing defense. In 10 minutes, the light swords near the demonic armored pigs were completely depleted, and the herd of demonic armored pigs had also disappeared without a trace, absorbed by the dimensional vortex. In these short 10 minutes, Liuyan Ling's points had increased by 9,000 points, reaching a terrifying 74,000 points. However, it was clear that this kind of consumption was also very taxing on Liuyan Ling. When she landed from the air, her forehead was already covered in dense beads of sweat. Her wrist was also trembling slightly, and her face was a little pale. It was clear that the 300 light swords had consumed a lot of Liuyan Ling's energy. When the Liuyan family's ultimate technique, the 100 million sword technique, was cultivated to the Emperor sword level, it could release 100 million such sword lights at the same time. There was no need for more than 100 million sword lights. Just 10 million sword lights was enough for a flood-level Yuan Ko to return to the dimensional vortex. However, the current limit that Liuyan Ling could use was about 10,000 sword light. She had used 1,000 sword lights to kill the demonic pigs, and she had used more than 3,000 sword lights to kill the nether-level Yuan Ko. In addition to some other random Yuan Ko attacks, Liuyan Ling had already used up more than 6,000 sword light. This was equivalent to using up 60% of the sword essence in Liuyan Ling's body. It was not strange for Liuyan Ling to show such exhaustion. It seems like our Miss Ling is a little tired. However, this is not important. Andreevich, who is in second place, has less than 60,000 points, and there are only 20 minutes left. Miss Ling has already secured victory. Miss Ling will definitely win. Miss Ling, however, this host did not notice that the director below the stage was constantly gesturing for him to shut up. In the end, it was the assistant director who rushed to his side at the last minute and whispered in his ear, "Wrong. The second place is not Andreevich." "Not him? Then who is it?" the host asked in a daze. "It's that Yuzhong person, Gohan." Chapter 830. While everyone's attention was focused on Liuyan Ling's performance of the Billion Swords technique, Gohan's points had quietly surpassed Andreevich, who was in second place. When all the demonic armored pigs were killed, Gohan's total points had reached 65,800. He was only less than 9,000 points away from Liuyan Ling's 75,000 points. He was also 5,000 points away from Andreevich, who was in second place. No one knew how Gohan did it. When they heard the host reveal Gohan's current points in astonishment, they suddenly realized that the second place had changed from Andreevich to Gohan. However, some of the audience remembered that 40 minutes ago, which was an hour before the end of the competition, Gohan's points were clearly only 22840. He had only obtained 11,000 points in an hour. It might be an impressive number compared to the average famed swordsman, but it was a far cry from Liuyan Ling's 58,000 points. However, Gohan had caught up to 65,800 points. It was equivalent to obtaining more than 43,000 points in 40 minutes. It was almost the same as Liuyan Ling's 2-hour score. How did Gohan do it? How did he do it? What did this Yuzhong guy do? Everyone was asking this question, but no one could get an answer. Moreover, during the 3 minutes the question was asked, Gohan's points were still rising. He had reached 67,000 points. In these 3 minutes, Gohan had gained 1,200 points. It was equivalent to killing 4 dragon-level Yuan Ko. "Oh no, will Miss Ling be caught?" someone in the audience immediately asked. This question resonated with the crowd. "Don't worry, she'll be fine." Someone in the audience immediately comforted them. Then, they began to make scientific calculations. This Yuzhong guy got 1,200 points in 3 minutes. He will only get 8,000 points in 20 minutes. He will only get 75,000 points in total. It's just the same as Miss Ling's current points. After 20 minutes, Miss Ling's points will definitely exceed 80,000 points. Miss Ling will definitely win. The audience was comforted by this person's words. Unfortunately, this comfort lasted for less than a minute before it was immediately slapped in the face. Because in the next minute, Gohan's points directly jumped from 67,000 to 69,000, which was equivalent to killing 2 nether-rank Yuan bandits in a minute. If it continued to increase at this rate, their Miss Linlin would be sent flying. Cheating. He must be cheating. That Yuzhong dude must be cheating. Thus, the entire audience was stirred up in an instant. They all expressed that it was impossible for a normal person to achieve such a speed. This Gohan must have cheated. He must have won through some special bug. Unfortunately, the audience couldn't see Gohan's battle. If they couldn't see Gohan's battle, they wouldn't be able to find evidence of Gohan's cheating. Therefore, some of the audience changed their target and began to shout, "We want to see Gohan! We want to see Gohan's battle! Hurry up and show us Gohan's battle!" This was the first time that the audience requested to see Gohan's battle. Hearing the audience's request, the members of the organizing committee in the VIP stand couldn't help but whisper. They also realized that something was wrong. In the 2-hour battle broadcast, there were pitifully few scenes of Gohan's battle. Therefore, the organizing committee members immediately conveyed their opinions to Tomono Kakashi. Then, Tomono Kakashi found Gohan in battle and said to him helplessly, "Can you restrain yourself a little? I'm going to point the camera at you soon. You won't be able to hide it anymore." "How many minutes do I have?" asked Gohan, who was in the midst of a crazy battle. As the Chidyen slashed the node of a Triceratops, the nether-rank Yuan-Ko with full HP was sent back into the dimensional vortex. "I have at most 30 seconds before I turn the broadcast to you," Tomono Kakashi said, and then she hung up the call. "What a pity. It's my first time fighting so comfortably." Gohan directly slashed the node of a Triceratops and sent it back into the dimensional vortex. After that, there wasn't a single dinosaur left in the area. Gohan had to find another place to continue farming monsters. Therefore, when the broadcast camera turned to Gohan, Gohan was running leisurely in the forest, which shocked all the audience. Could it be that Gohan had been running all this time? Then where did his points come from? However, the audience soon found it strange because countless arrows suddenly emerged from the depths of the forest and enveloped Gohan. As long as the sword rain could hit 10%, Gohan would immediately be shot into a sieve. Of course, this seemingly lethal rain of arrows did not pose much of a threat to the solid Han. 9 swords of mysterious heaven, sword of the abyss. A few sword auras of sword of the abyss cut all the arrows flying at him in half, forcibly opening a path for Gohan to move forward. Because it took a long time to draw the bow, after the first wave of arrows disappeared, the second wave of arrows needed a certain amount of time to prepare. This gap gave Gohan the last chance. Taking advantage of this gap, Gohan directly stepped on the tree trunk and rushed into the lush bushes like the wind. His speed was so fast that even the camera in charge of tracking Gohan could not keep up. When the camera finally found Gohan again, there were already more than a dozen corpses lying around her. These corpses were all wearing turquoise clothes that seemed to be made of leaf. Their ears were pointed like gourds, and each of them was very handsome. Their skin was very smooth and delicate, not even a single spot could be seen. These are all elven sharpshooters. Many of the audience recognized the origin of Yuan-Ko. After all, the elven sharpshooters were very famous among the Yuan-Ko. Because of their handsome appearance, even though these Yuan-Ko were the enemies of humans, humans still liked them very much. It was just like before the apocalypse, when some idiotic fans clearly knew how terrible Korea was to China, but they still liked to flatter the stinky feet of those Korean celebrities, wanting to lick them with their tongues. It was almost the same logic. Elven Sharpshooter, Flood Dragon level Yuan-Ko, 100 points each. This Yuzhong guy has already scored 1,200 points in less than a minute. He now has 68,200 points. Someone immediately calculated Gohan's point. Not only that, look at the rain of arrows just now. It took at least 100 elven sharpshooters to trigger. There are at least 100 elven sharpshooters nearby. Another audience member said, and his words were quickly verified. After Gohan cleared the canopy of a tree, he immediately leaped into another canopy. With a flash of his sword, the elven sharpshooters hiding in the canopy were all killed. From the footage of the corpses, it could be seen that all the elves had died with their throats slit. Apart from a single cut on their throats, there were no other wounds on their bodies. This meant that Gohan's attacks were all one-hit kills. He definitely did not use a second slash. In less than 10 minutes, over 100 elven sharpshooters hiding in the canopy were all killed by Gohan. Gohan's points had increased by 13,200, reaching a terrifying 79,200 points. Miss Ling. How many points does Miss Ling have now? A member of the audience asked anxiously. Even though Ling's points were written at the bottom of the screen, he could not help but ask his friend who was sitting next to him. Miss Ling's points are increasing very quickly. Miss Ling's points are now 83800. She's ahead of this Yuzhang guy by 400 points. His friend immediately replied. Time? How much time is left? 5 minutes, only 5 minutes left. As long as she can hold on for another 5 minutes, it will be enough. 5 minutes. 4,000 points. I wonder if Miss Ling can hold on for another 5 minutes, the audience members said worriedly. Don't worry. Look at the mini-map on the screen. There are only 3 red dots around this Yuzhang guy, and the other red dots are still 2 or 3 minutes away. The red dots that are further away are 2 to 3 minutes away. Unless all 3 red dots are meteor rank Yuan bandits, Miss Linlin will definitely win, the audience said excitedly. The mini-map was a map that only the audience members could see. In the eyes of the players, there was no such thing as a mini-map. The red dots on the mini-map were naturally the surrounding Yuan codes. From the audience members' words, it could be heard that there were only 3 Yuan codes left around Gohan. Unfortunately, the mini-map did not indicate Yuan Ko's level. Therefore, the audience members could only secretly hope that these 3 Yuan Kos weren't meteor-level Yuan Kos. This way, Gohan's points would at most be 3,000, and Liu Ling's first place would be guaranteed. Finally, these 3 red dots gradually approached Gohan, and finally revealed their true appearance. What the F***CK? Every Yanjing audience member had the same thought. The Yuan Ko that appeared in front of them was actually 3 high elven priestesses. Normally, the audience members would find these high elven priestesses very pleasing to the eye. This was because these high elven priestesses were not only beautiful, but more importantly, they didn't wear clothes. That's right, to the elves who worshipped nature the most, the high elven priestess was a holy profession that needed to be one with nature. Naturally, they had to use the most intimate way to feel nature. Even clothes made of tree leaves were something that hindered the power of the high elven priestesses. That was why the 3 elven high priestesses were all naked. Furthermore, the elves were famous for their good figures. Due to the fact that they only ate plants and spent most of their time in the forest, their buttocks and breasts were all perky and perky. Especially the pair of opis, which completely defied the laws of nature. Even though they were heavy, they still maintained the most perfect perky shape. Praise Tamono Kakazi. This advanced artificial intelligence definitely didn't know what mosaic meant. Chapter 831. And so, the audience watched the most exciting battle of their lives. As the sword light and physical bodies clashed, an intense battle began. At the start of the battle, the 3 chief elven priestesses undoubtedly had the upper hand. Even though Gohan had already killed many meteor-level Yuan Ko, Gohan still did not dare to be careless when facing the 3 meteor-level chief elven priestesses in front of him. This was still Gohan's greatest trump card. He could not rely on attacking Yuan Ko's nodes to kill him instantly. Otherwise, the audience would be more than happy to help Gohan promote the power of the point sword. Hence, Gohan could only rely on the traditional way to fight the 3 chief elven priestesses. The chief elven priestesses were undoubtedly long-range magic unit. At a long distance, even Gohan might not be able to withstand their magic attack. Hence, if Gohan wanted to win, he had to immediately close the distance between him and the 3 chief elven priestesses. After all, they were magic unit. Once a warrior got close to them, even if there was a difference of more than 10 levels, they would still be beaten up on the battlefield. Hence, as soon as he discovered the chief elven priestesses, Gohan rushed out like an arrow released from a bow. The juicy sword's tip pointed straight at the chief elven priestess with the fairest skin. Great God of nature, let your children form an impenetrable wall. A green-skinned chief elven priestess chanted. Countless vines in the surroundings instantly gathered together to form a shield, blocking in front of Gohan. Gohan did not even look at it. 2 streaks of sword aura shot out, intending to shatter the shield formed by the vines. But unexpectedly, the 2 streaks of sword aura did not succeed. After leaving a deep cut on the shield, the vine shield remained intact. As for Gohan, he did not stop in time and crashed into the vine shield. Then, he fell below the treetop. Great! All the spectators in Yanjing City cheered in unison. Seeing that Gohan had been knocked down from the tree crown, the spectators were extremely excited. As expected, the chief elven priestess was the best. She wasn't just powerful enough to obstruct that damned Yuzhang dude, she still offered him so many benefits. Cameraman, I want an extra drumstick for dinner tonight. The male spectators roared in excitement. Their blood was boiling as they watched, and they even set up a huge tent below. It couldn't be helped. In the process of the battle just now, these high priests had to move their bodies, stretch their little hands, kick their long legs, and so on. While he was kicking and waving his hands, the beautiful scenery that couldn't be hidden was naturally displayed in front of the audience, causing them to feel intoxicated. P.S. I didn't want to explain it at first, but considering that some readers don't understand this meme, I'll explain it. The cameraman adding a drumstick is a meme from Bilibili. For more details, you can go to Baidu. There are only 3 minutes left. Our Miss Ling will definitely win. Even though they were just worried about Liunian Ling's results, the spectators were now unanimously optimistic. That's right, we were too foolish just now. We even said that we don't want 3 fell-level Yuan Ko. It would be better if there were 3 fell-level Yuan Ko. I don't believe that this Yuzhang dude can kill 3 fell-level Yuan Ko in 3 minutes. Like a flag, the chief elven priestess on the screen, who was still feeling smug because she could cast the Vine Shield spell at any time, suddenly had a change in expression. Then, her entire body seemed to be grabbed by something, and she instantly fell from the tree crown. Camera! Quickly pull down the camera! The spectators shouted in unison. The moaning sounds of the chief elven priestess made the spectators' blood boil, and they couldn't wait to see what was happening below the tree crown. But at this moment, the camera was stunned, still at the tree crown, and had no intention of pulling down. Cameraman, your drumstick is gone! The spectators wailed. They could only hear the moaning sounds of the green-skinned chief elven priestess, but they couldn't see the intense battle scene. It was really a very torturous thing. At the same time, the remaining 2 chief elven priestesses looked at each other for a moment, then jumped down from the tree crown together, and joined in the chaotic battle below the tree crown. Oh my God! They are starting to have a threesome! The male spectators began to howl, but the camera was still at the tree crown. F***CKU cameraman, there is no one on the tree crown. Why are you still taking pictures of the tree crown? Hurry up and pull down the camera. What the hell are you doing as a cameraman? After a long period of protest from the male spectators, the camera finally began to slowly pull down, and the spectators finally saw the battle scene below the tree crown. The first thing that the spectators saw gave them a big fright, and they almost vomited the food that they had just eaten. It was because the first thing they saw was a piece of white meat that was casually thrown on the ground like a broken bowl. At the top of this piece of white meat there was a bright red cherry. Below this piece of white meat, bright red blood soaked the entire ground. It was only then that the spectators realized what the white egrets were, and they all felt like vomiting. The next scene was even more cruel, and the green-skinned chief elven priestess was the most miserable. Her dimensional vortex was already floating in the air, and her corpse was missing a leg and an arm. Later on, when the attentive spectators watched the video, they discovered that the arm of the green-skinned chief elven priestess was in a thicket a dozen meters away, and her leg was hanging vertically between two tree branches, swaying with the wind. It looked like a pair of green silk stockings, and also like a piece of cured meat that was being dried. The fair-skinned chief elven priestess and the dark-skinned chief elven priestess were still fighting, but they weren't in a good state. The chief elven priestess was blinded in one eye, and blood flowed out of her eye socket. There was a large wound on one of her thighs, and one could almost see the muscles protruding out of it. The fair-skinned chief elven priestess was in a slightly better state, and she was only missing a piece of flesh on the left side of her chest. The rest of her body was still intact, and it could be said that she had retained her strongest fighting power. Crow's Storm. The dark-skinned chief elven priestess cast another spell, and a flock of crows flew out of nowhere and quickly surrounded Gohan, forming an airtight wall that made Gohan lose sight of himself. "Hurry up! Use the judgment of the god of nature while he's trapped," the dark-skinned chief elven priestess said loudly to the fair-skinned chief elven priestess. Shortly after, the fair-skinned chief elven priestess floated in the air, and she quickly chanted a magical incantation. A dazzling giant light sword gradually took shape between the palms of the fair-skinned chief elven priestess. Judgment of the god of nature. It took a full 5 seconds for the powerful spell to be channeled. Then, it charged at Gohan, who was surrounded by the Crow's Storm, with lightning-fast speed, and it released intense radiance as if an atomic bomb had exploded. "Don't worry. No enemy can survive the judgment of the god of nature." The dark-skinned chief elven priestess struggled to speak to the fair-skinned chief elven priestess. It seemed like they were quite confident in the power of this spell. "What level is your god of nature at, Yuan-ko? Universe level? Or Eon level?" Gohan's apathetic voice rang out beside the dark-skinned chief elven priestess, and she was given a fright. She instinctively wanted to escape from Gohan's side, but this was a completely wrong response. However, this was a completely wrong response. If she was smart, she would have immediately raised a magic shield to block the attack of the solid cold. Running away would be putting the cart before the horse. How could a mage like her outrun a swordsman like Gohan? Unfortunately, she didn't make the right choice in the moment of panic. Therefore, a second later, her abdomen was pierced by the solid cold. Then, a dozen or so sword of the abyss sword chi burst out of the black-skinned high priest's body, directly killing her into a pile of minced meat. "Don't come over! Don't come over!" The fair-skinned chief elven priestess seemed to be frightened by what happened to the dark-skinned chief elven priestess. She threw her staff aside and fell to the ground, unable to stand up again. She could only use her arms and but to desperately retreat. With such speed, it was impossible for her to escape from Gohan's sword. After a few seconds, Gohan was already standing in front of the fair-skinned chief elven priestess. He raised the Juzi sword in his hand, ready to end Yuan-ko's life with one strike. "Let me go. Let me go, please?" The fair-skinned chief elven priestess seemed to know that escaping was useless, so she threw herself forward and hugged Gohan's leg with her naked body. She begged bitterly, "Let me go. I can be your slave. Elven slaves are very valuable, and a chief elven slave like me is even more valuable. Let me go. I don't want to die yet." Any man who saw such a beautiful woman begging would have the urge to agree to her request, not to mention that she had agreed to be his slave. Imagine hugging a female slave of the elf high priestess on the bed at night, posing in all kinds of embarrassing positions, and using all kinds of methods to toy with the body and shame of the elf high priestess. How satisfying would that be? All the male viewers couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. They wanted to agree on behalf of Gohan, but it was a pity that they weren't the main characters in the live broadcast. Meanwhile, Gohan seemed to be attracted by the fair-skinned chief elven priestess's pleading and didn't strike. At this moment, a vicious glint appeared in the eyes of the high priestess. Then, a ball of bright white light surged out of the center of her remaining opal. This ball of white light kept growing, and it soon reached the size of an egg. This was a spell used by the elves to perish together with their enemies. As long as this ball of white light reached the size of an egg, the High Priestess's mana would explode in an instant, and the power would be equivalent to a full-powered strike from U-Realm Master Yuan Ko. If Guhan were to take this attack head-on, then Guhan would definitely die. Unfortunately, the High Priestess couldn't wait for this moment. Before the white light reached the size of an egg, the pitch-black Juzi sword directly pierced her heart. The High Priestess's mana heart was hidden in the middle of her heart. This was the place where all of the High Priestess's mana was stored. Once it was pierced, the High Priestess's mana would instantly dissipate, and all the spells would also disappear. When the dimensional vortex absorbed the body of the High Priestess, the time had just returned to 0. This made all the viewers grieve. This meant that Guhan had successfully obtained 9,000 points, and Yanjing City had lost. Chapter 832. We've lost, we've lost. I can't believe our Yanjing City still lost. The entire audience was suddenly filled with wails. Perhaps because everyone's attention was focused on the thrilling battle just now, they did not seem to notice the real-time points that were constantly scrolling on the bottom left corner of the screen. And when the sadness was at its strongest, a member of the audience suddenly came online and opened the points on the bottom left corner. Then, he screamed with the loudest voice he had ever screamed in his life, "We won! We won! Miss Ling won!" Everyone was stunned when they heard this. Then, they went online to look at the points on the bottom left corner and realized that Yanjing City had indeed won. The first place was still Liu Yanling's name, while Guhan's name was only in second place. Everyone was a little stunned. They never expected that Yanjing City would still win in the end. Although Guhan had successfully obtained 9,000 points in the last 5 minutes, Liu Yanling had also obtained 10,000 points in the last 5 minutes, stabilizing her advantage over Guhan at 5,000 points. This was because in the last 5 minutes, Passerby B, who had separated from Liu Yanling, was somehow surrounded and beaten up by 4 Meteor Yuan Ko and died in battle. And Liu Yanling, who had rushed over to help Passerby B, was helpless against the siege of 4 Meteor Yuan Ko. She also began a final battle. However, unlike Guhan's melee battle with the 3 high priests, Liu Yanling's battle style was like that of a beautiful peacock. Her remaining 4,000 sword flashes bloomed behind her. These 4,000 sword flashes were evenly divided into 4 parts and shot toward 4 different Meteor Yuan Ko. Although these Yuan Ko used all their strength to defend against these sword flashes, it was a pity that these sword flashes still pierced into the Meteor Yuan Ko's body. 3 Meteor Yuan Ko were sucked back by the dimensional vortex on the spot, but 1 long-armed ape monkey lasted until the end. This long-armed ape monkey was holding a long iron rod in its hand. It was unknown what material this iron rod was made of, but it was actually able to shatter the all-pervasive sword light of the billion sword technique. Therefore, only about 800 of the 1,000 sword lights pierced the long-armed ape monkey's body, while the other 200 or so were shattered by the long-armed ape monkey. It was also because of these 200 sword flashes that the long-armed ape monkey successfully survived. At the same time, Liu Yanling's condition was much worse. Because she had used up all 10,000 sword flashes, there was not a single sword flash left in Liu Yanling's body. And because of the huge consumption, her entire body seemed to be exhausted. She could only sit weakly on the ground, not even having the strength to raise her hand. Seeing this scene, the long-armed ape monkey let out a shrill cry. Then, it stomped on the ground and leaped high into the air. Then, it raised its metal rod high in the air. Its target was the weak and immobile Liu Yanling who was lying on the ground. The long-armed ape monkey's metal rod itself was extraordinary. Otherwise, it would not have been able to shatter Liu Yanling's sword flashes. In addition, after the long-armed ape monkey leaped high, it could use the gravitational potential energy to increase its strength. Once this metal rod hit Liu Yanling's body, only death awaited Liu Yanling. At this critical moment, a very gentle and intellectual beauty suddenly appeared beside Liu Ling, holding a 3-foot-long sword in her hand. The 3-foot-long sword can cut through the boundless. This intellectual beauty was naturally the Sword Lady, the 1-foot lady, who had been drinking coffee with Guhan earlier. When the 1-foot lady held the 3-foot-long sword in her hand, this gentle and intellectual beauty suddenly changed into another person. She was like a warrior who would never yield. Even if she only held a 3-foot-long sword in her hand, she would still slash through all enemies that stood in her way. This was one of the only 2 human path sword ladies, the 1-foot sword lady. Humans had transformed from apes, which were living in the middle of the food chain, into the unquestionable ruler of the entire earth. Even dinosaurs, which were thousands or tens of thousands of times stronger than humans, would be instantly blasted into dregs when they were faced with human weapons. If the Confucian Path Sword Lady represented the power of defense, then it would be self-perfected to cultivate the body, govern the family, and rule the country. The Martial Path Sword Lady represented the power of balance, and it was an endless exploration of balance. The Killing Path Sword Lady represented the power of offense, and it was an endless pursuit of ultimate attacks. The Demonic Path Sword Lady represented the power of evil, and it was an attempt to prove itself on another level. Then, the Human Path Sword Lady was the power of humans. As long as humans still had a breath left, the Human Path Sword Lady would never perish, and it would still be able to slash through the darkness of the entire world. Hence, the Human Path Sword Lady was the final power of humans. Hence, up until now, the Human Path Sword Lady had never failed, because once the Human Path Sword Lady failed, it would mean the extinction of the entire human race. In the instant that the 1-foot sword came into contact with the long-armed ape monkey's metal rod, all the humans in the instant's dungeon, including Guhan, felt their bodies weaken. They stood on the ground, unable to move, as if something had sucked away all the energy in their bodies. This was also the reason why Guhan paused for a long time when the white-skinned chief elven priestess was hugging his leg. It wasn't because Guhan was hesitating, but because Guhan's body really couldn't move. This inability to move lasted for around 3 seconds before Guhan and the others regained their strength. At that moment, the long-armed ape monkey's body was like a sand sculpture, with sand constantly disintegrating from its body. Finally, the long-armed ape monkey had completely turned into a pile of pitch-black sand. What was surprising was that, after the long-armed ape monkey turned into a pile of sand, no dimensional vortex appeared. This seemed to be a hint that the long-armed ape monkey wasn't dead. But in fact, the long-armed ape monkey couldn't be any more dead. This was because the Yuan Ko that had died at the hands of the Human Path Sword Lady was the only Yuan Ko that wouldn't be sucked back by the dimensional vortex. This meant that this Yuan Ko didn't even have the right to return to its original world. It had completely disappeared from all the dimensions. Now, everyone should understand the power of the Human Path Sword Lady. The Human Path Sword Lady was a sword lady that could borrow the power of all the human sword ladies in battle. As long as there was a human alive, the Human Path Sword Lady would still have power to borrow, and the Human Path Sword Lady wouldn't fail. And things like Yuan Ko were born for humans. After dying at the hands of ordinary sword ladies, they would return to the dimension that belonged to them. However, when they died at the hands of the Human Path Sword Lady that represented humans, the foundation for these Yuan Ko's existence was gone. Humans had completely abandoned them, and they no longer belonged to any dimension. The dimensional vortex naturally wouldn't send them back. These Yuan Ko were like kites that wreaked havoc in the sky. Even if they were torn and damaged by the power of the sky, they could rely on the string in their master's hand to return to their master's hand. However, once the string was cut, the kite would become a lonely ghost that would drift around with the wind. Finally, it would land in a desolate corner and become worthless trash. The master was the dimension that they belonged to, and the string was the dimensional vortex. The Human Path Sword Lady didn't attack the kite directly. Instead, she attacked the string that was pulling the kite. Once the string was cut, the kite would naturally dissipate like a sand sculpture. To put it bluntly, the human path sword lady could borrow the power of other humans to fight for her. As for other humans, they didn't even have the right to refuse. They could only let the human path sword lady borrow their power. Only Jiandi could use his own willpower to resist the borrowing of this power. Therefore, to a certain extent, the human path sword lady's power was boundless. Of course, it was also very dangerous for the human path sword lady to borrow the power of humans. This was because after the power was borrowed, humans could only stand on the spot without moving. Just like Gohan previously. If he remained motionless for a little longer, it was very likely that Gohan would perish together with the chief elven priestess self-destruction. When the human path sword lady started borrowing the power of others to fight, the other humans would be unlucky. If they weren't careful, they would die in the hands of the sword bearer who borrowed their power. This situation happened many times when the human path sword lady was first discovered. The first generation of the one-foot swords sword bearers were usually infatuated with the boundless power of the human path sword lady. They would borrow the power of other humans without restraint. This caused many sword bearers to suddenly be unable to move in battle and die tragically at the hands of Yuan Ko. In the end, this sword wielder incurred the wrath of the sword monarch, who killed this sword wielder. Then, the sword monarch strictly protected the human Dao sword lady. He stipulated that only sword wielder with a strong moral character and recognized by the sword monarch had the qualifications to synchronize with the human Dao sword lady. Until now, there were only two human path sword ladies, the one-foot sword and the Emperor Yu sword. Therefore, in reality, only the 3-foot sword and the Emperor Yu sword could synchronize with each other. From then on, when the human path sword lady wielding the human path sword lady used the human path sword lady, she would restrict the range of the power she borrowed to herself. This way, it wouldn't cause any danger to others. Of course, if she only used her own power, then the human path sword lady's power wouldn't be any different from other sword ladies. In fact, it might even be weaker than other sword ladies. Only when faced with a truly critical moment for the human race, such as the invasion of the base city that concerned the life and death of the human race, would the wielder of the human Dao sword Maiden borrow the strength of all the humans to launch a final counterattack against the Yuan bandits. This situation had occurred a total of 4 times, and each time, it had achieved astonishing results, killing a large number of Yuan bandits. However, according to the statistics of later generations, no matter if it was an ordinary person or a sword bearer, their lifespan would be shortened by around 5 years after being borrowed by the human path sword lady. This also meant that there was a price to pay for borrowing the power of others. This price was the lifespan of other humans. The more power borrowed, the longer the lifespan of other humans would be. However, as the intermediary of this power, the sword bearer of the human path sword lady would suffer greater injuries. The lifespan of other humans would be shortened by 5 years, while this sword bearer would almost lose the ability to move after the great battle. He would become paralyzed like Hawkins, and wouldn't be able to live for more than a year. Therefore, when the one-foot sword borrowed the power of other humans to kill this long-armed ape, the intermediary, Liuyan Ling, completely fainted. Blood flowed out of her 5 orifices. It was obvious that she had suffered great injuries. Chapter 833. Gohan took off his game helmet and heard cheers coming from the training field. They shouted in unison, "Miss Ling! Miss Ling!" Obviously, they were cheering for Yanjing City to win this crucial victory. Gohan also accepted the fact that he was in second place very calmly. Who asked him to be so pretentious in the first 2 hours and let Juzi and Chidian kill Yuan Ko by themselves? If he had done it himself in these 2 hours, then his score would have exceeded 150,000 points. Of course, this score was a little too terrifying. Gohan did not want to get so many points and cause some unnecessary trouble. Now this score was just right. In fact, the gap between Gohan and Liuyan Ling was not much, and it was enough for Gohan to enter the final round of the competition. When he successfully defeated all the opponents in the final round of the competition and won the championship of the Elite 8 Academies tournament, then Gohan could also fulfill his promise. This was enough. At this time, the other remaining contestants also took off their helmets one after another. Gohan glanced at the throne, but was surprised to find that only Liuyan Ling was still lying on her seat with her helmet on. She did not look like she was going to wake up at all. Could it be? Gohan immediately walked quickly to Liuyan Ling's side, pressed the forced exit button on the helmet, and forced Liuyan Ling out of the game. Then he took off the helmet and touched her forehead. Sure enough, Liuyan Ling's forehead was shockingly hot. What is that despicable man doing? Is he not reconciled to his failure in the game and wants to take revenge on Miss Ling in reality? A spectator noticed Gohan's strange behavior and immediately said to the people around him. Soon, the others also noticed Gohan's actions. They began to clamor and shout at the martial arts arena, asking Gohan to leave their goddess, Miss Ling. Soon, the staff of the organizing committee also noticed this. They first sent 2 people to Gohan and Liuyan Ling to inquire about the situation. After exchanging a few more words with Gohan, the 2 staff members hurriedly said something into their personal terminals. Soon after, a doctor in a white coat rushed over with a medical pod and placed Liuyan Ling in the medical pod for emergency treatment. What's going on? What happened to Miss Ling? Only then did the audience realize that the situation was different from what they had imagined. Could it be that Miss Ling was injured? But that was impossible. Although the battle just now was very intense, it was only a battle in the game. Even if she died hundreds or thousands of times in the game, it would not affect her in reality. How could Miss Ling be injured so badly that she had to enter the medical pod to recuperate? Miss Ling's mental state has suffered great damage. The doctor in the white coat frowned as he looked at the data that kept flashing on the medical pod. He asked Gohan, what exactly happened in the game? Why did Miss Ling's mental state suffer such great damage? Gohan instinctively recalled the situation at the last minute when his body suddenly lost its strength and was unable to move. When he thought about the 3-foot sword, the answer was simple and clear. It should be the human sword Maiden. Ling used the power of the human sword Maiden at the last minute to absorb strength from us contestants. So that's how it is. The doctor nodded. Perhaps that's the reason. However, our medical center's database has never recorded the use of the human sword Maiden's power in the game. So, it remains to be seen if that's the reason. Then Dr. Comrade, is there anything wrong with Lin? Gohan asked again. She'll recover after some rest. As for the damage to her lifespan caused by the human sword Maiden, I don't know. After all, this is just a game. It shouldn't cause any damage to her lifespan, right? The doctor's words were filled with uncertainty. After all, this was a topic that no one had ever studied before. The doctor did not dare to make any careless conclusions. After answering Gohan's question, the doctor reported Liuyan Ling's condition to the organizing committee of the 8 hospitals conference, which was seriously concerned about this matter. If it was another contestant who was injured, the organizing committee could not be bothered with such matters. However, it was a member of the Liuyan family who was injured this time. It was different. If it was not handled properly, it would cause a huge problem. The 4th round of the competition has ended. The first team is the Liuyan Ling and Passerby B. They have a total of 96,000 points. Liuyan Ling has 88,000 points, and Passerby B has 8,000 points. The second team is the Gohan team. They have a total of 88,200 points. Gohan has 88,200 points. The third team is the Andreevich team. They have a total of 76,200 points. Andreevich has 48,000 points, and Ladia has 28,200 points. The fourth team is the Harry Chong Rua team. They have a total of 50,300 points. Harry Chong-rua has 27,300 points, and Leslie Dracula has 23,000 points. The last 4 teams are the Passerby B, Leslie Dracula, Harry Chong-rua and Ladia. Eliminated. Gohan, Leonyan Ling, and Andreevich have advanced to the finals. After the host announced the individual scores, Gohan realized that he was still in first place. He was 200 points ahead of Leonyan Ling. Yes, he was only 200 points ahead. However, 200 points was still a score. So, in terms of individual scores, Gohan was still in first place. However, this time, the total score of the school was not based on individual scores, but on the total score of the team. As a result, Yuzhong University, which was represented by Gohan, was still in first place with a total score of 181 points. Then, Yenjing University was in second place with 179 points. Finally, Moscow University was in third place with 151 points. Apart from them, the other schools had all been eliminated. As for the rankings, there was nothing to pay attention to. I believe that the readers are not interested in knowing the names of these people. Dear audience, today's competition has ended. The finals will begin at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Now, please leave the arena in an orderly manner. The remaining 3 contestants, please do not leave your thrones. Before the end of the competition, you are not allowed to leave your thrones. I repeat, dear audience. The broadcast in the martial arts arena kept repeating this message. It was close to 6 o'clock in the afternoon. The audience, who were tired after watching the competition for a day, began to prepare their positions. Just when everything was going on in an orderly manner and 2/3 of the audience had left the arena, the audience began to prepare their positions. The broadcast in the martial arts practice field was suddenly interrupted by a hurried voice. I am the Sword Spirit of the Hung Palace from the Shanhaiguan Dispatch Headquarters of the Sword Committee. I am here to announce that the Octagon Tournament has ended. All famous sword holders who participated in the Octagon Tournament are not allowed to leave Yenjing City. You must report to the Sword Committee before 8 p.m. I repeat, the Octagon Tournament has ended. All famous sword holders who participated in the Octagon Tournament are not allowed to leave Yenjing City. You must report to the Sword Committee before 8 p.m. After the Sword Spirit of the Hung Palace repeated this message twice, he directly ended the broadcast. The audience was baffled, and the contestants were even more baffled. What's going on? Didn't they just say that the finals will be held tomorrow? Why did it suddenly end? A spectator asked his friend next to him. Why are you asking me? I'm also confused right now. I don't care when it ends. I just want to know who will come in first if it ends now. Another spectator said. What's there to ask? If it ends now, the first place will naturally be that Yuzhong guy. After all, they have the highest total points, another spectator said with a sneer. This isn't right. How can this be? How can the tournament end just like this? There must be something shady going on. That Yuzhong guy must have bribed the damn Sword Committee. We are going to complain. We are going to complain. Regardless of how the audience was making a ruckus, Gohan, who was sitting on his throne, was thinking silently. As a matter of fact, he had roughly guessed what was going on when he heard the Sword Spirit of the Hung Palace. The Sword Spirit of the Gue Palace suddenly rushed out and forcefully announced the end of the 8 Academies tournament. In addition, all the sword bearers had to report to the Sword Committee headquarters before 8 o'clock in the evening. This meant that something huge had happened in Shanhai Pass. The sword bearers who were supposed to go to Shanhai Pass next month had to act immediately. They might even have to go to Shanhai Pass the next day. No. I don't have time to waste here. Gohan immediately stood up from his seat and went to a staff standing beside the throne. Hello, comrade. Can I leave the throne now? You can't. Before the finals begin, none of you are allowed to leave your thrones. The staff member immediately replied instinctively. Didn't you hear what the sword spirit of the Hung Palace said? He said the tournament is over. Since the tournament is over, why can't I leave? Gohan questioned again. This. The staff stuttered for a long time and didn't know how to answer Gohan. Hence, Gohan didn't want to waste any more time on the staff. He jumped off the throne and dashed out of the arena. It was 6 p.m., and there were still 2 hours before the final assembly time of 8 p.m. Gohan had to do something within these 2 hours. Originally, Gohan planned to spend a day or two to settle these things after the Octagon tournament. But now there were only 2 hours left of the solid cold. Hello. Is it Gu Xuanwu? Gohan called Gu Xuanwu first. Gu Xuanwu's impatient voice came from the other end. What's wrong? Don't you have to finish the tournament tomorrow? How many more days do you need to accompany me to Shanghai Pass to meet my mother? No, I might have to leave for Shanghai Pass tomorrow. No, I might have to leave tonight. Go to the hotel immediately and wait for me. Gohan hung up the call. Chapter 834. What's the matter? I'm having a good time in the game. When she saw Gohan, Gu Xuanwu was obviously a little unhappy, which meant that she was having a good time in the game. You can enter the game? Gohan was taken aback. This Gu Xuanwu could actually enter the game. Could it be that she was really no different from a human in her human form? Exactly the same? Of course. Gu Xuanwu said proudly. I even synchronized Bai Tai's sword. I've promised Bai Tai that we'll be good friends in real life. You synchronized with Sword Lady in the game? Gohan was so surprised that he was speechless. A Yuan Ko could actually synchronize with Sword Lady. Gohan felt that his common sense had exploded. Was this Gu Xuanwu really his daughter? Come on, these things have nothing to do with you. Tell me, why did you call me over in such a hurry? Gu Xuanwu said in disdain. Didn't you tell me the day we met that your mother is living in Shanghai Pass? Gohan said a shocking fact. Gu Xuanwu's mother actually lived in Shanghai Pass. She lived in the most tragic battlefield in human history. Every inch of land was a place where fierce battles took place. It's not Shanghai Pass, it's a dimensional gap in Shanghai Pass. Gu Xuanwu corrected. Regardless of whether it's a dimensional gap or not, one thing is clear. If you want me to see your mother, I have to make a trip to Shanghai Pass, right? Gohan said. Yes. Gu Xuanwu did not refute this time. But didn't you say that you still have a lot of things to do and will need some time before you can go back with me? No, things have changed now. I might leave for Shanghai Pass as soon as tonight. But this time, I might set off with the human army, so you can't appear in front of them. You have to enter my dimensional pocket with Yuan Ko's form. Only then can I bring you into Shanghai Pass. Do you understand? Dimensional pocket? What's that? Gu Xuanwu tilted his head and asked. You don't need to know what it is. All you need to know is to stay inside and I will bring you into Shanghai Pass. Otherwise, you'll have to find a way to enter the Shanghai Pass and meet me there, Gohan said coldly. Come on, I have the ability to come out, but I don't have the ability to go back in. You humans have surrounded the Shanghai Pass like an iron wall, and there's also the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation on top. Other than following you, what else can I do? Gu Xuanwu said helplessly. According to what she told Gohan, she didn't leave Shanghai Pass through a normal passageway. Instead, she left Shanghai Pass through a dimensional tunnel in the dimensional gap. Otherwise, how could Gu Xianwu, a half-baked Nether-realm Yuan Ko, break through the Zhou Tian Star Battle Formation that not even 12 Zhu Wu could break and leave the Shanghai Pass? Unfortunately, this dimensional tunnel was a one-way tunnel. After Gu Xuanwu came out, she couldn't enter again. Therefore, she could only rely on Gohan and enter Shanghai Pass through Gohan. However, it was impossible for Gohan to bring a strange person like Gu Xuanwu into Shanghai Pass. Gu Xuanwu wasn't even a sword-bearer, so how could the Shanghai Pass Management Committee agree to let her enter Shanghai Pass? Therefore, Gohan had to put Gu Xuanwu into his dimensional pocket, just like how he had put the 3 Egyptian deities into his dimensional pocket 2 months ago and brought them into Yuzhang City. Although Gu Xuanwu didn't want to enter Gohan's dimensional pocket, she could only agree with Gohan's suggestion since she had no other way to enter Shanhai Pass. However, Gu Xuanwu suggested that she could only enter Gohan's dimensional pocket at the last moment. Now, she wanted to enjoy her last bit of freedom. Up to you. I'm going to the Sword Committee meeting now. You can enjoy your freedom around the Sword Committee. You have to be on call. Gohan could only say that. Don't worry, don't worry. Speaking of which, why are you going to the Sword Committee meeting now? Didn't you say to gather at 8 o'clock? It's only 6:10 now. Isn't it a little too early? Gu Xuanwu asked curiously. I still have to go see Lu Shihua. There are some things I need to do. This has nothing to do with you. Gohan left after saying that. Are you kidding? What do you mean it has nothing to do with me? I'm your daughter. Also, who is Lu Shihua? No, for the sake of my mother, I must get to the bottom of this. Gu Xuanwu's little head turned and he muttered to himself. When Gohan received Lu Shihua's call, Lu Shihua was in a meeting at the Yanjing City Sword Committee. Therefore, Gohan asked Lu Shihua to meet at the Sword Committee. Lu Shihua didn't dare to neglect Gohan's request. The meeting was only halfway through before she left. She sat quietly in the hall of the Sword Committee and waited for Gohan's arrival. Lu Shihua didn't wait too long. In just a few minutes, Gohan appeared in front of her. It could be seen that Gohan was in a hurry all the way. There was sweat on his forehead. It was obvious that he ran all the way. There's still an hour and 40 minutes. There's no need to rush here in such a hurry, right? Lu Shihua asked inexplicably. What made Lu Shihua even more puzzled was the girl in the white silk uniform behind Gohan. She held Gohan's hand tightly. The expression on her face was full of intimacy. It was as if they had an extraordinary relationship. Teacher is really too much. He already has so many women at home, yet he still wants to find another one when he's in Yanjing City. But since teacher has found so many women, why doesn't he be more intimate with me? Lu Shihua lamented in his heart. Husband, who is this woman? Is she your new concubine? Gu Xuanwu blinked his eyes and then asked Gohan very coquettishly. Husband. Lu Shihua was completely dizzy. They hadn't seen each other for a few days, and Master was already married? Ignore her. Just treat what she said as nonsense and ignore her existence. Gohan pulled his hand out. Let's go to Sword Pavilion with me now. Sword Pavilion? Why are we going there? Lu Shihua looked confused. To find your sword lady. The reason why Gohan brought Lu Shihua to Yanjing City was to help Lu Shihua coordinate his sword lady. However, many things happened after they came to Yanjing City, causing this matter to be pushed back again and again. Now that the 8 Academies assembly was over, Gohan might have to go to Shanhai Pass, and this trip might take a few years. So, Gohan had to help Lu Shihua coordinate his sword lady in the last hour or so. But Master... Lu Shihua wanted to say something, but Gohan grabbed his wrist rudely. If you have anything to say, we can talk when we get to Sword Pavilion. We don't have time to waste. But Master, I'm still an ordinary person. If I want to synchronize with the sword lady, do I have to submit an application first, have my body checked, and take the exam before I can go to the Sword Pavilion to synchronize with her? Lu Shihua asked weakly. Gohan didn't say anything. He had to admit that Gohan really forgot that there was such a step to synchronize the sword lady for the first time. Moreover, this was in Yanjing City, and he couldn't use the privilege of Yuzhang City at all. It was quite embarrassing. Fill out the application first. Gohan could only pull Lu Shihua to the counter of the Sword Bearer's Service Center. He asked for a form from the attendant and began to fill out the application for synchronization. However, after a while, Lu Shihua quietly pulled Gohan's sleeve and pointed to the occupation column on the form. He asked weakly. What should I fill in here? Fill in whatever occupation it is. Of course, Gohan knew what Lu Shihua was asking him. Don't worry about those strange things. You are the real pavilion master now. Lu Shihua nodded and then solemnly filled in the occupation column with the words, Sword Pavilion Master. Although Lu Shihua was very hesitant when filling out the form, it was a waste of time. The attendant glanced at the form roughly and probably only looked at Lu Shihua's name. He didn't pay attention to the occupation at all because it had no effect on the application to become a sword bearer. In the end, this form would probably become a pile of useless information and be piled up in a dimensional warehouse somewhere. Perhaps no one would care about it even after thousands of years. Therefore, whether it was before or after the apocalypse, things like filling out forms were mostly useless and a waste of resources. However, one had to fill it up because if they didn't fill it up and something went wrong, they would be in big trouble. Alright. Both of you, please go to the number 7 and number 8 physical examination centers for your physical examination. When the physical examination confirms that your sword element has reached 100 quarks, you can take the exam and enter the sword pavilion for synchronization. After hearing the attendant's words, Gohan seemed to have returned to the memories of him and Song Hama coming to the sword-bearer's service center and meeting Song Yifei, Liu Ling, and finally Qing Pin. This was a very important day for Gohan because he had met the most important women in his life on this day. However, Gohan and Song Hama had gotten it together that day, so he had 2 numbers. However, there was only Lu Shihua now. Why were there 2 numbers? Gohan turned around and realized that Gu Xuanwu, who was beside him, had filled out a form and handed it to the attendant. Then, he also received a number from the attendant. The attendant probably saw that Gu Xuanwu and Gohan were together, so he said there were 2 people. What are you doing? Gohan pulled Gu Xuanwu to the side and scolded him softly. It seemed that Gohan was really like Gu Xuanwu's father. What do you mean? Don't you understand? I want to be a sword bearer. I promised Bai Tai that we would be friends in real life, Gu Xuanwu said confidently. But you are Yuan Ko. Yuan Ko can't be a sword bearer, Gohan said. You are a human. Gu Xuanwu paused. I am your daughter, and I am also a human. For the first time, Gohan felt that Gu Xuanwu might really be his daughter. Chapter 835. It's here. Let's go check the amount of sword essence in your body. Gohan brought Lu Shihua and Gu Xuanwu to the entrance of the examination center and prepared to enter examination room number 7 with Lu Shihua. Aren't you going in with me? At this time, Gu Xuanwu suddenly shouted at Gohan. I won't accompany you. Gohan replied coldly. Who wants you to accompany me? Gu Xuanwu spat and rushed into examination room number 8 alone, leaving behind a calm Gohan and a similarly unhappy Lu Shihua. Alright, little sister, you are very amazing. You actually have such a high amount of innate sword essence. The person in charge of examining Lu Shihua's body was an old nurse in her 60s. After the results of the examination came out, she said to Lu Shihua with a face full of smiles. Old woman, I only see such a high amount of innate sword essence once or twice a month. Little sister, you must do your best. Strive to find a sword lady that belongs to you and contribute your strength to the rise of mankind. Of course, the old nurse didn't know Lu Shihua's true identity. If she knew that the little girl in front of her was actually the master of the sword pavilion in Yuzhong City, I don't think she would speak to Lu Shihua with such a tone and attitude. And you, young man, you also have to do your best. Strive to become a sword bearer yourself. Otherwise, when your girlfriend becomes a sword bearer, she won't like you anymore, the old nurse said to Gohan. The old nurse's eyes didn't seem to be very good. She didn't seem to see that Gohan had 3 sword scabbards hanging on his body. Thank you, Granny Nurse, Lu Shihua said sweetly and then took his examination form. The number 365 quarks was clearly written on the sword essence column. Having more than 300 quarks of innate sword essence was indeed a very amazing thing. It was already at the level of 1 in 10,000. However, it couldn't be compared to Liu Ling's innate sword essence, which was close to 10,000. It's exactly a year's time. Guhan saw this number of sword essence and couldn't help but mutter in his heart. He vaguely felt that this number seemed to have a special meaning. But what exactly did this meaning mean? Guhan didn't know. Guhan didn't have much time to think before he suddenly heard a shocking scream from the room next door, as if something terrible had happened. Not good. That's Gu Xuanwu's examination room. The scream came from there. Guhan immediately stood up from his chair and looked at the room nervously. Could it be that the medical equipment has discovered Gu Xuanwu's true identity and found out that she is a Yuan-ko? Thinking of this possibility, Guhan felt a chill run down his spine. Because of the incident with Ku Rakin, the entire Yanjing city was now extremely sensitive to the situation of Yuan-ko's infiltration. If others were to discover Gu Xuanwu's true identity, Tian knew if he would end up like Ku Rakin, locked up in jail. Guhan rushed out of the examination room 7 and instantly appeared in the examination room 8. Guhan took a closer look, only to see that the nurse in the 8th examination room was trembling as she held onto a checklist in her hand, while Gu Xuanwu was sitting there with a smile on his face, without the slightest bit of fear. Sorry. No one saw Guhan's movements clearly, and the checklist in the nurse's hand appeared in Guhan's hand. Guhan made up his mind that if this checklist found out that Gu Xuanwu was a Yuan-ko, then Guhan would immediately destroy this checklist, then knock out the nurse and destroy all the data here to see if he could hide Gu Xuanwu's true identity. If it really didn't work, then Guhan could only escape from Yanjing City. As long as he left Yanjing City, Guhan believed that no one would be able to catch him again. Race: Human Han. Guhan first looked at the position of the race on the checklist, and then let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, it seemed that Gu Xuanwu's human form was very perfect. Even such a sophisticated instrument could not detect her identity as a human and Yuan-ko hybrid. But the real identity of Gu Xuanwu was not discovered. Then why did the nurse scream? Did she see a ghost? At this time, the nurse finally found out that the checklist in her hand had disappeared. She looked around inexplicably and saw that Gu Han had suddenly appeared in the examination room, and in Gu Han's hand was the examination report that she had just been looking at. What are you doing? Who allowed you to take the doctor's things? The nurse immediately asked bluntly. I wanted to ask you, why did you scream just now? Guhan did not answer, but asked the nurse a question. Oh right. Why did I scream? The nurse thought blankly, then suddenly thought of something and screamed again. Ah! The nurse pointed at Gu Xuanwu and screamed, She's not human. She's not human. When Guhan heard this, he immediately became a little nervous. Could it be that the nurse found evidence that Gu Xuanwu was not human from the other data on the checklist? She's a genius. A super genius. The number 1 genius in the world, unparalleled in the world. The nurse's next words made Guhan's whole face stiffen. Then, he immediately looked at the checklist in his hand and directly looked at the place where the sword element number was written. The red 5-digit number 95628 almost blinded Guhan's eyes. It was actually a number close to 100,000. So far, who had the highest innate sword element among humans? Some people said it was Kanzu, because Kanzu directly synchronized with the famous swordswoman. Later, Kanzu also admitted that his innate sword element was around 15,000 points. However, this view was not recognized by everyone because there was no way to detect sword element in that era. All the sword element was estimated by later generations and could not be used as an accurate basis. When humans had an accurate method to detect sword element, the highest recorded innate sword element was 14,893 quark. This was a number that blinded everyone, and this number had not changed for more than 700 years. In the past 700 years, no one had been able to surpass this number. Moreover, according to statistics, the average innate sword element of humans was constantly declining, so it was almost impossible to find someone who could surpass this number in the future. But now this number had been surpassed by 6 times, reaching a shocking 95,628 quarks. This was a number that could almost destroy all human common sense. No wonder the nurse screamed after seeing this number. If Gohan was the nurse, he would also scream. Seeing that there were people gradually looking over to see what was going on, Gohan immediately put the checklist into his dimensional pocket and said to the nurse calmly, "What are you screaming for? What's there to scream about? Is there anything strange about this? Isn't there anything strange about this?" After hearing Gohan's words, the nurse finally stopped screaming. This is an innate sword element of 95,628 quarks. She has already created a record that humans can no longer break. Who told you this is innate sword element? Gohan said disdainfully. This was all her acquired sword element, and her real innate sword element was only a few hundred quarks. That's impossible. The nurse was at a loss. The checklist she brought clearly states that she's only 18 years old, and she's an ordinary person. How could she have acquired the acquired sword element? You've been tricked by her. Gohan glared at Gu Xuanwu fiercely. She only looks young. She's already 28 years old, and she's not an ordinary person. She's a famous sword-rank swordsman. She usually likes to play tricks on people. I apologize on her behalf. So that's how it is. So she's already a famous sword-rank swordsman. I knew it. How could a human have 95,628 quarks of innate sword element? Perhaps it was because the truth of 95,628 had destroyed her worldview too much that the nurse's subconscious could not accept it at all. Therefore, when Gohan gave her a barely acceptable explanation, the nurse instinctively accepted it. Even after Gohan left examination room 8 with Gu Xuanwu, the nurse was still immersed in the incident and could not extricate herself from it for a long time. It was not until 10 minutes later that the nurse suddenly came to a realization and patted her head. That's not right. This data should have been provided by the personal terminal. It's impossible for her to have faked her age and identity. Thinking of this, the nurse immediately turned on her computer and wanted to look up the information on Gu Xuanwu. However, all the information on Gu Xuanwu had disappeared. No matter how hard the nurse searched, she could not find any trace of Gu Xuanwu. This discovery immediately made the nurse silent. The nurse, who usually liked to watch all kinds of conspiracy theories, immediately felt as if she had discovered a shocking secret. This secret must be related to some secret plan of the human race. That was why Gu Xuanwu's information was deleted in an instant. Moreover, there might even be people coming to kill her immediately. Thinking of this, the nurse felt a kind of earth-shattering terror. Then, she fled home without even applying for leave. She packed some things and hid in a childhood friend's house for a whole month. By the time she realized that it seemed like no one was coming to kill her, it was already too late. Due to continuous absenteeism for a month, the Swordsman Service Center had already fired her. Moreover, because of this terrible absenteeism record, it was very difficult for her to find another job. After more than 3 months of failure to find a job, the nurse felt that her spirit and body were greatly damaged. She concocted a bottle of high-concentration sleeping pills and drank it. In the end, she passed away miserably from this world. No matter what, Gohan did not expect that a casual lie of his would cause someone to walk into a dead end. Therefore, people should not casually lie to others. Who knows, someone might die from your lies. Chapter 836. How is it? Did you set it as confidential? Gohan asked Lu Shihua, who was next to her. After leaving the inspection room 8 with the Gu Xuanwu, Guhan immediately asked Lu Shihua to set all the information about the Gu Xuanwu as an SSS-level confidential in Yuzhong City. Since the Gu Xuanwu's personal terminal belonged to Yuzhong City, Lu Shihua, as the head of the Sword Garret in Yuzhong City, could naturally do this easily. At the same time, because this was an SSS-level confidential information belonging to Yuzhong City, only the two most powerful people in Yuzhong City could read this information unless it was inquired in the name of the Sword Garret. This was also the reason why the nurse couldn't find the information of the solid black tortoise when she tried to check it again. Because the level of the hospital was not even qualified to know this information, let alone read it. 95628 Innate Sword Essence. Is she really a human? Even though Lu Shihua had read this information countless times, she couldn't help but feel shocked every time she saw this number. She felt that the Gu Xuanwu was no longer a human. The lie that Guhan used to deceive the nurse naturally couldn't fool Lu Shihua. Moreover, Guhan didn't want to lie to Lu Shihua. This was because the Gu Xuanwu couldn't be hidden from people who were close to her, and there was no need to hide it from people who were close to her. Guhan didn't want to be like those idiot protagonists in those 8 p.m. family ethics TV series, deliberately hiding things that were not necessary to be hidden from the person who loved him, causing all kinds of misunderstandings under the inexplicable intention of doing something for his own good. In the end, both sides suffered a lot, and then he could easily pull out 20 to 30 episodes of bitter drama. Lu Shihua was destined to be Jiandi, so Guhan didn't want any misunderstandings between her and Lu Shihua, which would lead to the rupture of their relationship. Therefore, Guhan explained to Lu Shihua, Gu Xuanwu's situation is very special. She is both a human and a Yuan Ko. Her physique can freely switch between the two. As a Yuan Ko, she was already close to the level of a nether-level Yuan Ko. Now that she's a human, she might also have the sword essence of a nether-level Yuan Ko. Guhan told Lu Shihua his conjecture in full detail, but Lu Shihua was still in a state of confusion. Why don't you tell her I'm your daughter? Are you not willing to admit your mother's existence to anyone? Not willing to admit to anyone that you had a relationship with a Yuan Ko, and even gave birth to a daughter? Hearing that Guhan did not take the initiative to confess that she was her daughter, Gu Xuanwu seemed to be somewhat angry. Lu Shihua was still confused. What daughter? He didn't understand at all. I said, I don't know your mother at all, and I don't know what's going on with you claiming to be my daughter. Before I completely understand the truth of the matter, I will never admit that you are my daughter. Guhan knocked Gu Xuanwu's head hard, then knocked Lu Shihua's head, then asked, Do you understand now? No. Lu Shihua shook his head hard, but I believe in Master. Whatever Master says, I will do. I still need to make a subjective judgment, but I believe that Master is definitely right. Guhan nodded in satisfaction, then held Lu Shihua's hand. Let's go. Let's go to the exam hall now. We only have an hour left. The layout of the exam venue in Yanjing City was similar to that in Yuzhong City. There was a row of benches for people to rest on outside the door. Thinking back to the time when Guhan learned telepathy from Liun Ling on this bench, he felt quite emotional thinking about it now. Lu Shihua and Gu Xuanwu were both in the exam venue. Originally, Guhan didn't want Gu Xuanwu to go in, but Gu Xuanwu strongly requested to go in. Thinking about it, Guhan didn't stop Gu Xuanwu. This was because Guhan really wanted to know if this cheap daughter of his could synchronize with the sword lady in the real world. But soon, Guhan regretted this decision because Gu Xuanwu's voice became noisy in Guhan's ears. Hey! Let me ask you, which swordsman killed Sora Aoi? Also, this winter horse Hesha and Xiao Mu Xingshuetsai, which one is the mistress and which one is the bitch? And this, Yuanko, who turned over a new leaf and helped the humans defeat the Martyr's Palace. For some reason, Gu Xuanwu also knew telepathy. Then, Gu Xuanwu threw all the questions on the exam to Gohan and asked Gohan to answer them for him. He didn't know who came up with the exam questions in Yanjing City. Out of the 10 questions, there were actually 2 or 3 that even Gohan couldn't answer. This was the super top student Gohan, who scored more than 1,900 points in yesterday's Elite 8 Academy's assembly. There were actually 20 to 30% of the questions that Gohan couldn't answer. For example, this Sora Aoi's name, Gohan hadn't even heard of it before. Winter Horse Hesha and Xiao Mu Tsing Xuetzai had heard of them once or twice. They were a pair of enemies in the Free City. When they visited Yanjing City, they made quite a lot of jokes. This little mistress Gohan knew what it meant, but what the hell was this bitch? Gohan had never heard of this term before. As for Yuenko, who had once helped humans destroy the Martyr's Palace, Gohan knew her very well. However, whenever he thought of her name, he would always feel a little sad. It would be great if he could see her again. She's King Arthur Artoria. Gohan still told Gu Xuanwu this name. King Arthur? Artoria? What a familiar name. Gu Xuanwu smacked his lips. I remember now. My mom has a set of armor in her room. It's said to belong to that King Arthur. It's very precious, and I won't even be able to touch it. What? What did you say? Gohan stood up abruptly, scaring the people around him who were waiting for his friend to finish his exam. I said I have a set of King Arthur's armor at home. What's wrong? Is there a problem? Gu Xuanwu asked out of the blue. Not at the moment. Gohan sat back down. It seemed like he had to follow Gu Xuanwu to her home. Perhaps he could find clues about Artoria there. Husband, before you become an immortal sword wielder, you must not try to find news about Sister Artoria. Even if you accidentally find news about Sister Artoria, you must not look for her. Husband, please promise Qing Air this, okay? At this moment, I Ching's words rang in Gohan's ears again. This was the promise that I Ching had made Gohan make at the end of the Heroes Begin at the End Instance dungeon. Gohan had also promised I Ching that he would not try to find Artoria before he became a sword immortal level swordsman. But when the clues about Artoria were really placed in front of Gohan, Gohan hesitated again. Such a great opportunity was placed in front of her. Was she really going to give it up? With this starting point, my combat ability is no longer at the top of the meteor level Yuan Ko. Even if I'm facing a universe level Yuan Ko, I should be able to guarantee that I won't die. Does this mean that I already have the ability of an immortal sword wielder? And this is just Artoria's armor. It can't be considered a clue. Even if this is a clue, as long as I don't really look for Artoria, it shouldn't be considered as breaking my promise to I Ching. This was the process of deceiving oneself and others. Although he knew that this was breaking his promise to I Ching, under Gohan's own consolation, this promise did not seem to be broken. In short, when a person's heart was desperate to do something, then all previous promises would become a laughable joke. Just like those men who swore to quit smoking, they still had cigarettes in their mouths in the end. Master? Master? Lu Shihua's concerned voice suddenly came into her ears. Gohan looked up and saw that Lu Shihua had already left the examination room. Obviously, she had already finished all the questions. How did the exam go? Gohan stopped thinking about Artoria and turned to care about Lu Shihua's result. This was because Gohan knew that before she met him, Lu Shihua only attended elementary school and had no knowledge about sword wielder. Furthermore, he knew nothing about sword bearers. Although he had studied a lot of knowledge about sword bearers after meeting Linley, it would still be quite difficult for him to pass the test. Your disciple is not capable. I only scored 90 points. I've let you down, Master, Lu Shihua said with shame. Not bad, this result is already very good. Gohan nodded. This result was already beyond Gohan's expectations. It seemed that Lu Shihua had not been idle during this period of time. Instead, she had furiously studied a lot of knowledge about sword wielder. Otherwise, she would not have been able to score 90 points in this exam, where the average score was only about 65 points. Haha, I scored 95 points. Following closely behind Lu Shihua, Gu Xuanwu also walked out with a face full of smiles and announced his score loudly. When Lu Shihua heard Gu Xuanwu's score, her face was first filled with shame. Then, as if she had realized something, she looked at Gohan with a face full of doubt, as if she was asking Gohan. Since Gu Xuanwu was half human and half Yuan Ko, he should have never been to school. How could he score 95 points, which even a genius student would find hard to do? Ahem. Gohan did not answer Lu Shihua's question. Of course, he could not tell Lu Shihua that he had actually answered almost all the questions on the exam paper. However, on the basis that he could not confirm the correct answers to 20% of the questions, Gu Xuanwu actually scored 95 points. It seemed that if he did not become a sword wielder, being a teacher would not be a bad choice. Alright. It's time to meet your sword mistress. Gohan patted Lu Shihua's shoulder. I think the two-winged angel sword mistress should be impatient. Chapter 837. You still have the nerve to come here? As soon as he brought Lu Shihua and Gu Xuanwu into the sword pavilion, he was blocked by an angry sword wielder. Gohan remembered this sword wielder. The last time he came to the sword pavilion to confront sword immortal Tianhen, this sword wielder was one of the sword pavilion's forces. He stood in front of Gohan, but was easily KO'd by Gohan. Why wouldn't I have the nerve to come here? Gohan snorted coldly. Am I the one who committed the crime? Even though you're not the one who committed the crime, it was your companion. Are you going to deny it? The sword wielder said indignantly. What a joke. Since when did the sword committee add a rule that implicates others? Even if Ku Rakin is my son, I have nothing to do with his crime. Why can't I come here? Gohan's words made the sword wielder speechless. You. The sword wielder wanted to say something else, but he was interrupted by someone on the second floor. Alright, let them in. Our Yanjing city still cares about our reputation. Besides, since when did the sword pavilion fall to such a state? The person on the second floor said coldly. Gohan felt that the voice was familiar. He looked up and saw that it was indeed an acquaintance he hadn't seen in a long time in Yanjing City. Junior Gohan pays his respects to Master Wuzhang Shifang. Gohan bowed respectfully to the person. This person was none other than sword immortal Wuzhang Shifang, who had saved Gohan's life in the Mei Ling mountain range. He didn't expect to see him in the sword pavilion at this time. Come up. With that, Wuzhang Shifang disappeared from the railing on the second floor. The sword wielder could only let Gohan lead Lu Shihua and Gu Xuanwu into the second floor of the sword pavilion. There was a sofa and a tea table on the second floor of the sword pavilion. However, Wuzhang Shifang didn't sit on the sofa. Instead, he knelt in front of the tea table. His Kusanagi no Tsurugi was placed beside him. This was the standard posture of the Fuso warriors. It seemed that Wuzhang Shifang had not completely forgotten where he belonged like most of the Fuso bloodline. Long time no see, milord. Since Wuzhang Shifang was kneeling there, Gohan naturally didn't dare to sit on the sofa. He could only copy Wuzhang Shifang and kneel in front of the coffee table. I saw you a few days ago. Wuzhang Shifang took out a small teapot and 2 small teacups from his dimensional pocket. The tea in the teapot seemed to have been brewed, so Wuzhang Shifang directly filled 2 small teacups, and then placed 1 cup in front of Gohan. Drink. Good tea. Gohan took a deep breath of the fragrance of the tea, and then finished the tea in the teacup in 1 gulp. 3 months ago, this junior would have never imagined that one day I would actually be able to receive the treatment of being personally poured tea by Lord Shifang. 3 months ago, I also didn't think that one day I would actually be willing to pour tea for you. Wu Zhang Shifeng smiled. He really didn't expect it. 3 months ago, the ancient sword-level sword wielder, who knelt in front of him and begged him to accept him as a disciple, had actually grown into a famous sword-level sword wielder. Moreover, he had defeated the current descendant of the Liuyan family, Liu Ling, and became the #1 sword wielder in the famous sword level. Then let this junior pour tea for milord. Guhan took the teapot from Wu Zhang Shifeng's hand and filled the teacups for himself and Wu Zhang Shifeng. Good tea. Wu Zhang Shifeng took a deep breath of the fragrance of the tea, and then finished the tea in the teacup in one gulp. Tell me, why did you come to my Yanjing City Sword Pavilion? Don't tell me that you can already synchronize the coordination of a spirit sword-level sword niece? No, how could this junior's speed reach such a level? Guhan looked at Lu Shihua and Gu Xuanwu behind him. I have 2 friends who need to synchronize the sword niece, so I accompanied them here. After all, I might have to rush to Shanhai Pass tonight, and the next time I come to Yanjing City will be 3 years later. How do you know that you have to rush to Shanhai Pass? Wu Zhang Shifeng blinked his eyes. I'm afraid there are no more than 10 people in Yanjing City who know about this. The sword spirit of the Gui Palace is in a hurry to find us, the strongest among the famous sword-level sword wielder. What else could it be for? If you use your brain a little, you can guess it. Guhan filled the teacup in front of him again. I'm curious as to why milord is in the sword pavilion. Could it be that milord is going to ascend the throne? How dare you make fun of me? Wu Zhang Shifeng's tone was filled with anger, but his expression was full of smiles. Sword Immortal Tian Heng has left, so the sword pavilion naturally cannot be without a leader. Therefore, thanks to His Majesty Hao Tian's favor, the temporary sword pavilion of Yanjing City has fallen into my hands. After a few days, when Sword Immortal Tian Heng passes away, things should be settled. Congratulations in advance, milord. Guhan cupped his hands at Wu Zhang Shifeng. Come on, I can't compare to you, the previous sword pavilion master of Yuzhang City. Wu Zhang Shifeng snatched his teapot from Guhan's hand and filled his cup. There are only a few minutes left until 8 o'clock. Hurry up and ask your friend to synchronize the sword niece. Turin, take the 2 ladies with you to synchronize the sword niece. Let them try what they want, but don't play any tricks, understand? Wu Zhang Shifeng said to the sword wielder, who was kneeling at the door to stop Guhan. Although the sword wielder's face was disgusting, as if he had eaten sh*t, he had no right to refuse because of Wu Zhang Shifeng's order. He could only take Lu Shihua and Gu Xuanwu to synchronize the sword niece. Guhan, do you remember that you once begged me to accept you as my disciple? After seeing Lu Shihua and Gu Xuanwu leave, Wu Zhang Shifeng suddenly mentioned this matter. Of course I remember, I will never forget this. Guhan's face stiffened, but he immediately returned to normal. Why did Wu Zhang Shifeng suddenly mention this? Does he want to accept me as his disciple again? However, today was different from that time. At that time, in order to save his life, Guhan naturally knelt in front of Wu Zhang Shifeng and begged him to accept him as his disciple. But now, Guhan's strength was comparable to a spirit sword-level sword wielder, and he also had a good master like Lu Lei in China. How could he still want to be Wu Zhang Shifeng's disciple? And I also gave you a condition at that time, saying that as long as you can become the champion of the Octagon tournament, I will accept you as my disciple. Unexpectedly, you actually became the champion of the Octagon tournament today. Speaking of this, Wu Zhang Shifeng laughed even more happily. Sir, you must be joking. The last round of the Octagon tournament has not yet been held, and Yanjing City is only a few points away from us. How could this junior accept it? What if I become the champion of the Octagon tournament? The meaning of Guhan's words was very clear, which was to tell Wu Zhang Shifeng that he no longer wanted to be Wu Zhang Shifeng's disciple. That's not right. Just now, the organizing committee has already made a decision. The results of these 4 rounds will determine the winner, so you are already the well-deserved champion of the Octagon tournament. Wuzhang Shifang once again drank the tea in the teacup in one gulp. Sir, at that time it was different from the past. This junior no longer dares to bother Sir. In the future, Gohan will go on alone. There is no need for Sir to waste your energy. Gohan continued to refuse. Are you really not going to reconsider? Wuzhang Shifang clenched his fist. As far as I know, Sword Immortal Yun Xiao may not last past next year. Without Senior Yun Xiao's suppression, those old guys in Yuzhang City are bound to make a scene. At that time, those old fellows in Yuzhang City will definitely cause a ruckus. If you don't have someone to support you, then I'm afraid you and your disciple won't be able to live so smoothly. It's just a position. What is it compared to the great cause of mankind? As long as everyone in Yuzhang City can work together, then this junior and this junior's disciple can even give up their buttocks. Gu Han said with a hidden meaning. Good. Wuzhang Shifang sighed. I'm afraid the biggest stupid thing I've done in my life was not accepting you as my disciple 3 months ago. Instead, it was Lu Lei who took advantage of it and obtained such a good successor. Sword Immortal Shifang, you flatter me. This junior doesn't deserve it. Gohan bowed again. All right, since you don't want to be my disciple, then I'll make a deal with you. With a wave of Wuzhang Shifang's hand, the teapot and teacups on the coffee table disappeared without a trace. Gu Han, let me ask you, do you know what my Wuzhang Shifang's ambition is? I do. Gohan's answer made Wuzhang Shifang speechless. According to Wuzhang Shifang's original plan, Gohan would definitely not know what he was thinking. Then, he could take the opportunity to talk and pull Gohan to his side. But when Gohan said that he knew, Wuzhang Shifang didn't know how to continue. Ahem, then tell me, what is my ambition? At Sir's level, your greatest ambition is to become an emperor and become an emperor sword wielder. Gohan smiled and said, but this is a well-known ambition. You don't have to make me guess, so I guess your ambition must be something else. At this point, Gohan paused. For example, recreating Fusang. Chapter 838. Good. 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 Wuzhang Shifang said good 3 times in a row. Finally, he slammed the coffee table, shattering it into pieces. The younger generation will surpass the older in time. The younger generation will surpass us in time. I didn't expect that the greatest ambition of my Zhang Shifang's life would actually come out of the mouth of an 18-year-old child. The younger generation will surpass us in time. The younger generation will surpass us in time. That's right. My greatest ambition in life is to take back Fusang Island that belongs to us and build the 9th base city of the human race, Fusang City, on Fusang Island. Wuzhang Shifang looked at Gohan with glowing eyes. Gohan, are you willing to help me? Are you willing to help me build the greatest enterprise in the past hundreds of years? Let's talk about it later. Gohan did not reject Wuzhang Shifang outright this time. Let's talk about it after you become the emperor. Otherwise, everything will be for naught. Of course. Then can you promise me that after I, Wuzhang Shifang, ascend to the throne, you'll lend me a hand? Wuzhang Shifang pressed on with his questions. While Gohan was about to answer the question, he heard an exclamation from the first floor. Gohan recognized the voice. It was the voice of Turin, who had been sent by Wuzhang Shifang to lead the way for Lu Shihua. At this moment, the sword wielder screamed. Could it be that something had happened to Lu Shihua? What's going on? Wuzhang Shifang stood up and went to the first floor to stand next to Turin. That man. That woman. That woman. Turin murmured for a long time before he finally said, that woman synchronized the double-winged angel swords. Phew. Gohan heaved a sigh of relief after hearing Turin's words. Although Lu Shihua had synchronized the double-winged angel swords in the game, there was still a possibility that it would fail in reality. Therefore, Guhan was still worried. Now, after hearing the confirmation from Turan, Guhan could finally put down his worries. What? It's actually the two-winged angel sword. Wuzhang Shifang was also taken aback when he heard this name. As an immortal sword wielder, how could he not understand the meaning behind the double-winged angel sword? Wuzhang Shifang immediately turned to look at Guhan. I finally understand why you insisted on giving the position of Sword Pavilion Master to an ordinary person, little friend Guhan. It seems like you already knew that this Lu Shihua could synchronize with the Sword of Angels, right? I don't lie in front of a real person. That's true. Guhan nodded and readily admitted this point. When the world heard the news, they all thought that you and old man Lu Lei in Yuzhang City had gone mad. Now it seems that we were all fooled by you. You're handing the Sword Pavilion over to an ordinary person. You're obviously handing it over to a Sword Emperor who's already a Sword Emperor. No matter what happens in the future, Yuzhang City will definitely have His Majesty Jiandi. My young friend Guhan, you're destined to have another disciple of Jiandi. Congratulations. When I see her later, should I address her as Your Majesty in advance? What's there to celebrate? What Her Majesty? At this moment, Gu Xuanwu ran out from a corner. Behind her was a fair-skinned, gentle-looking young lady. So it's the Iron Lady. Wuzhang Shifang heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the young lady. It seemed like the other young lady that Guhan brought over did not have any amazing talent. She merely synchronized one of the 3 foundational Jiandi swords, the Iron Lady. Wait, this sword lady doesn't seem to be an ordinary man-made sword lady. She's a natural sword lady. Wuzhang Shifang took a closer look at the Iron Lady. Although her expression was calm, her eyes were filled with a lively light. It was clearly not the eyes of the dull man-made sword ladies. However, Wuzhang Shifang vaguely remembered that the natural sword ladies of the 3 foundational sword ladies already had their own sword bearers. Turan, has the Iron Lady's natural sword lady returned to the Sword Pavilion? Turan asked behind Wuzhang Shifang. Master Shifang, the Iron Lady's original sword-bearer passed away yesterday due to old age. She was only sent back to the Sword Pavilion last night, Turan replied. My young friend Guhan, your friend is quite lucky. She came at the right time. Otherwise, she would have been snatched away by an ordinary person in a few days. Wuzhang Shifang said with a smile. He was right. The reason they were called the 3 foundational sword maidens was naturally because they were the most easily coordinated sword maidens among all the ancient sword-grade sword maidens. Whenever the 3 foundational sword ladies returned to the Sword Pavilion, many ordinary people would immediately fight to synchronize with them. Within a few days, they would find a new sword-bearer. This was why Wuzhang Shifang said that Gu Xianwu was quite lucky. If Gu Xianwu had come a few days later, the Iron Lady would have been synchronized away. Luckily, he only synchronized 1 foundational sword lady. I thought this Guhan had brought 2 geniuses with him. Wuzhang Shifang thought to himself. If Gu Xianwu was destined to be a future Jiandi like Lu Shihua, he would be so envious that he would vomit blood. Let's go. Let's continue. Gu Xianwu did not even look at Wuzhang Shifang. He pulled on Turan's sleeve and urged him. What are you talking about? Continue what? Turan was confused. Didn't you synchronize with your ancient sword lady? But I don't have a treasured sword yet. I still need to synchronize with a treasured sword. Gu Xianwu said and dragged Turan to the 2nd floor like a pig. Innate sword element 1000 quarks. Wuzhang Shifang, who thought he was not envious, was envious again. It turned out that the second person Guhan had brought was a genius with more than 1000 quarks of innate sword essence. Although it was not very rare, there were only 1 or 2 geniuses like this every year. Fortunately, 1 or 2 geniuses every year were still within the acceptable range of Wuzhang Shifang. Wuzhang Shifang himself had recruited quite a few geniuses with more than 1,000 quarks of innate sword essence. Gu Xianwu dragged Turan away. Not long after, Lu Shihua, who was followed by a two-winged angel in the air, returned to Guhan and Wuzhang Shifang. Master! Lu Shihua respectfully bowed to Guhan, and then bowed to Wuzhang Shifang, and then silently stood behind Guhan, acting as a human backdrop. That's great! Wuzhang Shifang was filled with envy when he saw this. He had so many geniuses, but they could not compare to Jiandi, who was destined to be a genius in the future. After that, Guhan and Wuzhang Shifang seemed to have nothing to say. After a long silence, Gu Xianwu broke the silence. This time, there was another sword mistress behind Gu Xianwu. This sword maiden was dressed in a blue hanfu. She had a golden crown on her head and a pair of milky white stockings on her legs. She had a head of long blue hair and looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. She was a cute young lady who looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. This sword mistress is. When Guhan saw the girl's appearance, he immediately searched for the faces of treasured sword mistresses and finally found a name. Is this sword mistress Xiao? Guhan pointed out the name of this sword mistress. I am Xioli. Greetings. Sword mistress Xioli nodded slightly at Guhan and the others. Her words and actions carried the demeanor of an emperor. She seemed to be a sword mistress of the way of the king. In fact, the beautiful sword was indeed a sword of the way of the king. Its original owner was the founding emperor of the Eastern Han dynasty, Lu Xiu. It was said that the sword was forged by Lu Xiu and his empress, Enlihua. Therefore, the two characters in their names were used to name the sword, which was why it was called the beautiful sword. As a sword mistress of the way of the king, and a sword mistress of a heaven-defying son of the realm like Lu Xiu, Xioli's sword should have been a famous sword. But for some reason, Lu Xiu was considered the most low-key founding emperor. Moreover, this Xioli sword was mostly placed in the palace as an ornament after it was forged. Later on, it was buried with Lu Xiu and Enlihua. Unexpectedly, the 3-foot sword of her predecessor, Liu Bang, the founding emperor of the Western Han dynasty, had a world-shaking legend like the White Snake Uprising. Naturally, it could only be ranked as a sword mistress of the sword pavilion. However, the beautiful sword was still very powerful among the treasured sword maidens. It was ranked 8th in the treasured sword record, and could be considered as the number 1 treasured sword maiden in Yanjing City's sword pavilion. Haha! Not bad, not bad! Wuzhang Shifang laughed dryly a few times. The 3 best treasured swords in the world were all in the Yuzhang sword pavilion. The Yanjing sword pavilion really didn't have many treasured swords that could be taken out. This Xioli sword was already the best sword mistress of the sword pavilion in Yanjing City. Who would have thought that the woman brought by Guhan would be able to coordinate with it? Wuzhang Shifang's heart ached when he thought of this. All right. I think it's about time. Guhan, you should go to the sword committee and meet with the sword spirit of Gui Hall. Let's leave the sword pavilion together. Wuzhang Shifang was afraid that if he stayed in the sword pavilion any longer, the sword mistress of the sword pavilion would be inexplicably coordinated away by someone else. However, in this world, what one was afraid of would happen. Therefore, Gu Xuanwu immediately said, "There's no hurry. I still want to go to the 3rd floor." Young lady, why do you want to go to the 3rd floor? That's where the sword mistresses of the famous sword mistresses are kept. Wuzhang Shifang laughed dryly. Yes. It's precisely because that's where the sword mistresses of the famous sword mistresses are kept. That's why I want to go there. Gu Xuanwu laughed innocently. I still want to coordinate with the sword mistresses of the famous sword mistresses. If it wasn't for Wuzhang Shifang's profound cultivation, he would have already collapsed in the sword pavilion. Chapter 839. In the end, when Gu Xuanwu appeared before Wuzhang Shifang with her famous sword, the Tai sword, He was on the verge of breaking down. Although the 3-foot sword, which was ranked first in the famous sword record, had already been taken away by Liu Ling, it was still a controlled object. Other than those who had been approved, no one else was allowed to touch it. Placing it in the sword pavilion was more like a symbol. As such, the Tai sword was the true number 1 sword Maiden in the Swallow Sword Pavilion. The Tai sword was ranked second in the famed swords record, and due to the fact that the 3-foot sword rarely appeared in the world, the Tai sword was the number 1 sword Maiden by default. Originally, this Tai sword was prepared to be left to the young talents of Yanjing City, but who would have thought that it would end up in the hands of the people brought by Gohan? Including the double-winged angel's sword and beautiful sword that had been lost before, in just an hour, Yanjing City's sword pavilion had lost 3 top-notch innate sword ladies. How could Wu Zhangshi not have the urge to cry? Ahem, there are only 5 minutes left. We have to leave immediately. Gohan looked at the time and found that there were still 5 minutes before 8 p.m. Thus, he began to urge Wu Zhangshi to leave. Little friend Gohan, tell me the truth. What's your relationship with this girl? The girl Wu Zhangshi was referring to was naturally Gu Xuanwu. After all, everyone in the world knew about the relationship between Lu Shihua and Gohan, so there was nothing for him to ask. She's my cousin. Gohan rolled his eyes. She's called Gu Xuanwu, a distant cousin of mine. She's been clamoring to come to Yanjing City with me. I didn't expect that she would become a famous swordsman right after her birthday. Cousin. Wu Zhangshi pondered for a moment. Little friend Gohan, is Miss Gu Xuanwu suitable for marriage? Or does she have someone that she admires? It's like this. My son is about to turn 18. He's young and talented, but he hasn't found a suitable partner yet. I can see that my little friend Gohan has extraordinary talent and will definitely become a great person in the future. I wonder if we can become in-laws? Let Miss Gu Xuanwu and my son spend more time together, we will be in-laws in the future. Wu Zhangshi said very seriously. Wu Zhangshi words almost caused Gohan to vomit blood. Wu Zhangshi actually wanted his own son to marry his own daughter. No, to marry Gu Xuanwu. It sounded very absurd, but on second thought, this Wu Zhangshi was really astute. He must have seen that he and Gu Xuanwu were both genius sword-bearers, so he felt that his family's bloodline was extraordinary. He wanted to use the Gu family's bloodline to improve his Wuzhang family's bloodline. More importantly, he and Gu Xuanwu were both strong and could become Emperor Sword-level sword-bearers in the future. Together with Lu Shihua, who would definitely become Jiandi's sword-bearer, the future power of Gohan's family could already be foreseen to be terrifying. If Wu Zhangshi became in-laws with him, it would be equivalent to finding a huge backer for the Wuzhang family in the future. Even if Wu Zhangshi could become an emperor, he was already almost 50 years old. He didn't have many more decades to live. The future would belong to young people like Gohan sooner or later. If Wu Zhangshi could receive the care of Gohan's family after he died, then the Wuzhang family could still live for a few decades. This Wu Zhangshi was really thinking long-term. Well, Gohan seemed to be seriously thinking about this problem. I have always respected freedom of love. Love and marriage, let them decide for themselves. We shouldn't interfere. If your son and my cousin can get along and develop real feelings for each other, then it's not impossible to become in-laws. If both parties are not fated, then there's no need to force it. Yes, that's the logic. Wu Zhangshi nodded his head continuously. He was very confident in his son. He was a handsome young man who had captivated many girls in Yanjing City. He believed that it wouldn't be a problem for him to deal with Gu Xuanwu. After we go to Shanghai Pass, I'm afraid Gu Xuanwu will stay inside and never come out. Whether your son can see this girl is still a problem. What free love! Gohan thought indifferently. He didn't plan to let Gu Xuanwu fall in love with a human at all. However, if this girl really stays in Shanghai Pass forever, then there's a big problem. A bitter smile appeared on Gohan's face. This girl actually coordinated with the three important sword ladies at the same time. If she stays in Shanghai Pass forever, then wouldn't these three sword ladies be like pearls before swine, never to see the light of day? If that's the case, then wouldn't I be the sinner of humanity, causing humanity to lose three such important natural-born sword ladies? Thinking of this, Gohan began to hesitate. He didn't know how to deal with Gu Xuanwu. Should he let her stay in Shanghai Pass forever and never come out? Or should he let her abandon her identity as Yuan Ko and become a real human? This was indeed a question worth thinking about. Is everyone here? In the meeting room of the Sword Committee, the sword spirit of Gue Palace glanced at the famous swordsmen sitting on both sides of the meeting table. Among these people were Liuyan Ling, Harry Chong Rua Andreevich, Leslie Dracula, and other outstanding young geniuses. There were also some older famous swordsmen present. These swordsmen were sitting on two sides. One side was occupied by young people, while the other side was occupied by old people. These people all had different emotions. The young sword-bearers all looked like they were eager to give it a try. They were clearly very confident in their own strength. They felt that their future was to survive in the midst of life and death, and that they were the protagonists of the entire world. They would definitely succeed and make a name for themselves in Shanghai Pass. On the other hand, the old swordsmen weren't as impulsive as the young swordsmen. Their faces were filled with fear. If it was possible, they would want to escape from this meeting room and not get involved in anything related to Shanghai Pass. Sir, there are only 2 people on your list who aren't here yet. A staff member standing next to the sword spirit of Gue Palace said. As the staff member was about to report the names of the 2 missing swordsmen, the sword spirit of Gue Palace waved his hand and said, "There's no need to say it. I can already tell who they are. I didn't expect some people to think that they are the best in the world and boast so arrogantly. I didn't expect them to become deserters. They don't even have the courage to come to this meeting room. What are you going to do to me if I don't come?" The door of the meeting room was pushed open. Gohan walked into the meeting room. However, Gu Xuanwu and Wuzhang Shifang were following behind Gohan. "The rules of the Sword Committee will deal with you." The sword spirit of Gue Palace glared at him and said in a deep voice, "You don't have to use these rules to scare me. When our Yuzhong city was under attack, I didn't see the rules of the Sword Committee, nor did I see any help." Gu Han retorted without hesitation. The rules of the Sword Committee had a strong binding force, because only cities that abided by the rules could receive free assistance from other cities organized by the Sword Committee when they were attacked. If the city didn't follow the rules, the city would be punished and lose a lot of benefit. Therefore, almost every city respected the rules and orders of the Sword Committee. However, 2 months ago, Yuzhong City and the Sword Committee had become enemies. Both sides didn't trust each other anymore. When Yuzhong City was under attack, the Sword Committee did not do a good job. Apart from Yanjing City and 3 other cities that sent reinforcements to Yuzhong City, the other cities didn't send any reinforcements. This was especially true for the city of London, where the sword spirit of Hades belonged. It was said that the reinforcements were lost in the Pacific Ocean after drifting for a month. As for whether the city of London sent reinforcements, only God knew. Moreover, Long Shi Jiendi, who was responsible for restraining Mountain Paradise, had actually retreated at the critical moment. As a result, Haotian Jiendi, who had come from afar, had been threatened by Jehovah and didn't dare to come close to Yuzhong City for reinforcements. Because of this, Gohan looked down on Long Shi Jiendi. Of course, Gu Han didn't dare to openly say that he no longer abided by the rules of the Sword Committee. Otherwise, if he really broke off the relationship with the Sword Committee, Yuzhong City, which would lose all the immortal sword-bearers, would definitely suffer a great loss when facing the next wave of Yuan Ko's attack. Let me explain on behalf of Gohan. His cousin just coordinated with the sword lady in Yanjing City's sword pavilion. She wasted a little time, so she was a little late. I, Wuzhang Shifeng, will take responsibility for this matter. You don't have to blame Gohan. In order to please Gohan, Wuzhang Shifeng took the initiative to take responsibility for this matter. However, it wasn't a big deal. They were just a few minutes late. After hearing Wuzhang Shifeng's words, even the sword spirit of Gue Palace was too embarrassed to say anything else. He could only bow stiffly to Wuzhang Shifeng. Then, the other famous sword-level swordsman came to a sudden realization and bowed to Wuzhang Shifeng, the sword spirit of Gue Palace. After getting Gohan and Gu Xuanwu to sit down, the sword spirit of Gue Palace said in a low voice, "I believe that in the past 2 hours, everyone has learned why I gathered everyone here through various channels. If anyone doesn't know, then I will tell them directly that Shanhai Pass can't hold on any longer." Just 2.5 hours ago, the Shanhai Pass headquarters sent an urgent report to the Sword Committee. The remaining tribes of the Wu people suddenly attacked the Sun Star, the great Zhoutian Star's star banner, as if they had gone crazy. Since the famous sword-level swordsmen have suffered heavy losses, the famous sword-level swordsmen guarding the Sun Star's main star are severely lacking in manpower. So far 2 of the main stars, the great Zhoutian Star's star banners, have fallen. 6 famous sword-level swordsmen and hundreds of ancient sword-level swordsmen have died on the spot. If this battle continues, I'm afraid that by noon tomorrow, the Sun Star's star formation will collapse. Once that happens, the entire Zhoutian Star's star battle formation will collapse. When that happens, I don't need to tell you what kind of fate humans will suffer. Therefore, according to the Sword Committee's emergency meeting, after the meeting ends at 8:30, everyone is to immediately take the Sword Committee's Super Maglev sports car to Shanhai Pass. You must arrive at Shanhai Pass before 8 o'clock tomorrow morning to support the Sun Star's star battle formation and kill all the damn Wu people's tribes. Just as Gohan had predicted, the Shanhai Pass battlefield was in great danger. Chapter 840. Leaving at 8:30? Isn't that a little too hasty? A middle-aged famed swordsman stood up from his seat. Although his legs were trembling, he still managed to stand up. I've just returned from outside the city, and I haven't even had the chance to spend some time with my parents and wife. Can I take a day off and set off tomorrow night? At least let us accompany our loved ones. This might be our last time. No. Before the swordsman could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by the sword spirit of Gue Hall. Shanhai Pass won't last past noon tomorrow. If I allow you to reunite with your loved ones today, everyone here will die at the hands of the 12 Zhu Wu in a few days. I don't need to waste my breath on which is more important. After hearing the sword spirit's words, the swordsman could only helplessly sit back down. The sword spirit was right. If Shanhai Pass couldn't be defended, then Yanjing City, which was the closest to Shanhai Pass, would definitely be the first to bear the brunt. The 12 Zhu Wu, who had been accumulating anger for hundreds of years, would definitely target Yanjing City for revenge. If Yanjing City fell, then everyone's families and relatives would not be able to survive. That's right. Even if it's for your loved ones, you can't back down this time. A very majestic and heroic voice sounded from the door. Everyone turned their heads and saw a man wearing a red and yellow robe with a 5-clawed golden dragon and a red-browed Baihu embroidered on it walk in. "Greetings, Your Majesty Long Sure." When they saw this person, all the swordsmen present, including the sword spirit Gohan and the 10-direction sword immortal, knelt on one knee in front of this person. However, there was one person who didn't kneel, and that was Gu Xuanwu. This child had never seen Long Shi Jiandi's photo before, so he naturally didn't know that this man was one of the 2 Jiandis, Long Shi Jiandi. However, even if Gu Xuanwu knew this, he probably wouldn't kneel. After all, he had grown up with Yuan Ko and didn't have the slightest bit of respect for Jiandi. Gu Xuanwu didn't kneel, and the 3 sword ladies behind him, Bai Tai, Shili, and Tai naturally didn't kneel as well. In reality, none of the sword ladies present knelt. There was not much of a hierarchy between the sword ladies. Even if an ancient sword lady met an emperor sword lady, as long as they did not like her, they would not even bother with her, much less kneel. Ha ha ha! Rise! Rise! Long Shi Jiandi didn't seem to mind this at all. He hastily beckoned all the sword-bearers present to get up, and then sat down on the seat of the sword spirit of the Gui Palace. I came all the way here to see the finals of the 8 Academies tournament and to see what young talents we humans have in the future. Long Shi Jiandi had an amiable look on his face as he said, but I didn't expect to hear such bad news as soon as I arrived in Yanjing City. It seems that I won't have the opportunity to see the grand occasion of the Elite 8 Academies tournament. Since I won't be able to see the finals of the 8 Academies tournament, then let me give all the young talents a grand farewell. This trip to Shanghai Pass is bound to be full of dangers, and any of you may be left there forever. I also stayed in Shanghai Pass for 3 years, and I know better than you what the situation in Shanghai Pass is like. It is a dangerous place, and even more so a dangerous place. Injuries are commonplace, and death is also rare. I don't know how many of you will be able to appear in front of me again when you return 3 years later. This is really the greatest sorrow of my human race. I had no choice but to throw the elite geniuses to that place generation after generation, and then watch them die helplessly. If I could, I would like to tear down that Shanghai Pass and break that Zhou Tian Star Great Array, so that my human race will never be burdened by Shanghai Pass again and again. But I am incompetent, I can't do it. My greatest ability is to offer you a cup of booze. After saying that, a few drops of tears rolled down from the corner of the Dragon Lion's Sword Emperor's eyes. It could be seen that this was not Long Shi Jiandi's acting, but his true feelings. Long Shi Jiandi admittedly had his selfish side, but when it came to major issues of right and wrong, Long Shi Jiandi was still deeply righteous. Long Shi Jiandi clearly knew that, apart from those middle-aged and elderly swordsmen, these children in front of him, who had become famous swordsmen at the age of 18, were all among the best geniuses of the human race. This was probably the most powerful wave of geniuses of the human race in the last 100 years. Among this wave of geniuses, it was very likely that the future sword immortal and Jiandi would appear. If I throw a group of geniuses like you into Shanghai Pass, how many of you can come back alive, I really don't know. If some of you die in Shanghai Pass, whether that person will be able to become Jiandi and sword immortal in the future, I also don't know. But I do know one thing. Shanghai Pass can kill geniuses, but it can also temper them. Among you, 1 or 2 geniuses with the talent of sword immortal and Jiandi may die. But there will be 3 or 4 Jiandi and sword immortals who have been tempered between life and death. If you can survive these 3 years, then your future will be bright, and human beings will be proud of you. At this point, Long Shi Jiandi's mood had brewed to the extreme. With a wave of his hand, dozens of void gates unexpectedly appeared at the same time, and then from each void gate came out an ordinary blue-rimmed bowl, which was already filled with fragrant wine. Come, everyone, drink this cup of wine. I assure you that after 3 years, I will still be here waiting for you to welcome you. Long Shi Jiandi raised the blue-rimmed bowl in front of him. Infected by Long Shi Jiandi's imposing manner, even those middle-aged and elderly swordsmen, who were originally somewhat afraid, at this moment, were full of courage and raised their blue-rimmed bowls. As a result, everyone raised their blue-rimmed bowls high, and the whole scene looked like the scene of 108 generals of Liangshan Pass holding a meeting, shouting to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. However, there were still some incongruous things in this scene, such as the Gu Xuanwu. To be reasonable, even a fool would know that it was necessary to wait for Long Shi Jiandi to finish drinking before the others could drink this bowl of wine. But our eldest Miss Gu Xuanwu did not understand this, but even if she did, she certainly would not care about it. To be reasonable, our eldest Miss Gu Xuanwu was still a good child, and had never drunk wine in her life. Therefore, seeing this bowl of fragrant liquid, eldest Miss Gu Xuanwu could not resist the temptation. When everyone raised their blue-rimmed bowls high, eldest Miss Gu Xuanwu began to gulp the wine down her throat. However, although this wine smelled very fragrant, it was actually not the same when it was drunk. After the eldest Miss Gu Xuanwu gulped down the first mouthful, her cheeks swelled up and instantly became red. Puchi! Eldest Miss Gu Xuanwu unceremoniously sprayed out the white wine in her mouth. Fortunately, Guhan, who was standing in front of Gu Xuanwu, had sharp eyes and quick hands. The sword qi in his hand curled up and wrapped all the liquid with his sword qi, and finally threw the whole sword qi out of the window. An unfortunate passer-by outside the window thought that it was raining, and quickly covered himself with his hands. When he came back to his senses, he found that he was already reeking of wine, and when he returned home, he was severely reprimanded by his wife. Seeing a lovely girl suddenly making this action, the present swordsman finally couldn't help but smile, put down the blue-rimmed bowls in their hands, and began to laugh. It was unknown how long Shi Jiandi felt when he saw this scene, but Jiandi, after all, was Jiandi, and certainly could not lower himself to the level of a little girl. Therefore, Long Shi Jiandi could only put down the blue-rimmed bowl in his hands with a gentle smile on his face, looked at Gu Xuanwu with interest, and asked with a smile, "Little girl, which city are you from? What's your name?" "My name is..." Before Gu Xuanwu had time to speak, she was interrupted by Guhan. "Your Majesty, she is this junior's cousin. She dropped out of school when she was a child, and has no experience, so she was somewhat impetuous. I hope your Majesty can forgive her." So it turns out to be the cousin of Pavilion Master Guhan. Long Shi Jiandi could not recognize other swordsmen, but this Guhan, who had fought against him in the Changyang Mountain, and finally kept the Xian Yuan sword, was something that Long Shi Jiandi could not recognize. Long Shi Jiandi's gaze swept over Gu Xuanwu, and then he was stunned to see the three sword ladies behind Gu Xuanwu. Except for the white iron sword, which was not worth mentioning, whether it was the beautiful sword or the Tai sword, they were all top sword ladies ranked in the top 10. It seems that this boy's family bloodline is not ordinary. Long Shi Jiandi, like Wuzhang Shifang, began to praise the bloodline of Patriarch Guhan. He was well aware of Guhan's strength. He possessed the number 1 treasure sword, the heavenly sword, and the Juzi sword, which appeared for the first time in front of the world. Guhan had already reported the news of the Juzi sword to the Sword Committee General Headquarters, and the Sword Committee General Headquarters also learned that after the ancient sword Lady Qinpin's sword, Guhan actually had another famous sword, the Juzi sword, which appeared for the first time in the world. Moreover, looking at the data of the Juzi sword, it could already suppress the 1-meter sword and the Tai sword, and become the number 1 sword lady of the famous sword grade. It was said that the Sword Committee General Headquarters had already sent a note to the famous Sword Records Compilation Committee. When the next edition of the famous sword record was released, the second place would not be the original Tai sword, but the Juzi sword. Everyone might find it strange. Wasn't the data of the Juzi sword the number 1 sword lady of the famous sword grade? How could it be tied for second place? Was it because the Juzi sword only surpassed the 1-meter sword in terms of attributes? But who made the 1-meter sword be the sword lady of the people's path, and it had the power of the entire human race behind it. As long as the 1-meter sword was willing, it could even suppress the number 1 sword lady of the spirit sword grade. Therefore, the position of the number 1 sword lady of the famous sword grade could only be placed on the head of the 1-meter sword. Sword Spirit of the Gui Palace, is Miss Gu Xuanwu's name on the list? Long Shi Jiandi suddenly asked the Sword Spirit of the Gui Palace beside him. Your Majesty, because Miss Gu Xuanwu became a famous sword-grade swordsman 10 minutes ago, she is not listed on the list, the Sword Spirit of the Gui Palace replied. Then add her name. Long Shijiendi nodded. Such a small number of people is still a bit tight for the Shanhai Pass. But now, with the appearance of the Tai Yi sword, the strength of the Shanhai Pass can be greatly strengthened. For the safety of the human race, the little girl still has to make a sacrifice. Chapter 841. Unexpectedly, with just a few words, Long Shijiendi had included Gu Xianwu in the list of famous sword-bearers who were going to support Shanhai Pass. Regarding this, Gohan couldn't say that he opposed it, but he also couldn't say that he agreed with it. The reason why he didn't oppose it was that regardless of whether Long Shijiendi allowed Gu Xianwu to join this operation or not, Gu Xianwu would eventually go to Shanhai Pass. Therefore, Long Shijiendi's behavior was meaningless. The reason why he didn't agree was that Gu Xianwu's identity would become more troublesome. Now, everyone knew that Gu Xianwu was going to Shanhai Pass with Gohan. If Gu Xianwu inexplicably disappeared in Shanhai Pass and couldn't come back, it was bound to arouse some speculations. Of course, these speculations were not without solutions. Gohan only needed to find an opportunity to make Gu Xianwu pretend to be dead. But in this way, Gohan would need to bring back all of Gu Xianwu's sword ladies. Cutting off the sword mark between Gu Xianwu and his sword ladies would become a huge problem. Well, there were still 3 years left. Gohan was also too lazy to think about these things. The boat would naturally straighten out when it came to the bridgehead. After being interrupted by Gu Xianwu, Long Shijiendi was embarrassed to make everyone drink together like before. Therefore, the imposing manner that the sword-bearers had summoned with great difficulty relaxed again. After Long Shijiendi said a few words of encouragement, it was already 8:30 p.m. It was time for everyone to set off. But at this time, the door of the conference room was pushed open again. This time, it was the aggressive sword Immortal Tiansun who came in. Behind him were 2 old men with 5 scabbards. Obviously, these 2 old men were also sword immortals of Yanjing City. Sword Spirit of Ming Palace, what do you mean by this? What right do you have to snatch people from the hands of our Yanjing City? Sword Immortal Tiansun asked the Sword Spirit of Ming Palace as soon as he came in. What's the matter? What's with all this noise? Long Shijiendi coldly said. At this time, Sword Immortal Tiansun was surprised to find that Long Shijiendi was actually in this conference room. Your Majesty Dragon Sure, what are you doing here? Sword Immortal Skysun asked in disbelief. Aren't you supposed to arrive tomorrow? I heard that Shanhai Pass is in danger, so I deliberately sped up my journey and directly used the Void Gate to come to Yanjing City. I want to meet these young talents who are about to go to Shanhai Pass and say a few words of encouragement. Can't I do that? Do I still need to consult you, Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun? Long Shijiendi's expression was somewhat sullen. I wouldn't dare. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun had no choice but to bow his head. But after all, this was his territory in Yanjing City, not to mention that Hao Tianjiendi was also in Yanjing City. Therefore, Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun was not inferior to Long Shijiendi in nature. He raised his head and asked Long Shijiendi with bright and piercing eyes, It is naturally not a problem for your Majesty to encourage these young heroes, but dare I ask your Majesty, what if there is a murderer among these young heroes? Murderer? What murder? Is there a murderer among them? Long Shijiendi didn't know anything. Of course there is. He is not only a murderer, but also a murderer who killed a sword-bearer, and also killed our Yanjing City. Enough! I know about this matter, and I don't need you to remind me. Long Shijiendi rudely interrupted Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun's words. I am clear about this matter. He is not the murderer. On the contrary, he was seriously wounded by Sword Immortal Tian Hen at the first moment, and during the whole process, he didn't even touch Tian Hen. How could he have killed the person? Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun, it is best to think carefully before using the word murderer. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun choked for a moment. In fact, in his heart, how could he not understand that Ku Rakin was just an unlucky bastard that Yanjing City used to vent its anger? At best, Ku Rakin's crimes were jailbreak and robbery. The hat of a murderer could not be placed on Ku Rakin's head. However, Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun didn't want to admit it just like that. He could only continue, "Your Majesty, your words are incorrect. If it weren't for that Ku Rakin bringing Yuan Ko into Yanjing City, how could Yuan Ko have killed Sword Immortal Tianhen? Although it wasn't Ku Rakin himself who did it, that Yuan Ko was brought in by Ku Rakin. Ku Rakin is the main culprit of this matter, and he is undoubtedly the murderer." Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun's words were not unreasonable. It was like raising a dog. Now that this dog had bitten someone, would it be you or the dog that had to pay for it? Of course it would be you. Otherwise, you would be worse than a dog. Sword Immortal Tianhen's death was still under the control of the Spirit Sword Grade and above sword bearers. Therefore, most of the famed sword grade sword bearers present had no idea what had happened. As the conversation between Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun and Long Shi Jiendi gradually deepened, the other famed sword grade sword bearers gradually understood what had happened. Then, expressions of horror appeared on their faces. What? Sword Immortal Tianhen is dead? What? Sword Immortal Tianhen was killed by Yuan Ko, who was brought in by Ku Rakin? Apart from the dozen or so geniuses who had participated in the Octagon tournament, most of the famed sword-grade sword-bearers present were from Yanjing City. After all, the practitioner's time limit was only 2 hours. Apart from the famed sword-grade sword-bearers in Yanjing City, the sword spirit of Gui Palace couldn't summon famed sword-grade sword-bearers from other cities. Therefore, when the famed sword-grade sword-bearers present heard this shocking news, they couldn't help but become restless. Some of them even began to pull out their swords and look around the conference room with vicious eyes, trying to find the famed sword-grade sword-bearer called Ku Rakin, who was currently in the conference room. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun. What's going on? Could it be that the Yanjing City sword-bearers want to compete with me in swordsmanship? Long Shi Jiendi saw this scene and immediately seized the opportunity to pressure Sword Immortal Heavenly Sunday. How dare you? How dare you show your swords in front of His Majesty? Put away your swords. Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun didn't hesitate and immediately vented his anger on these famed sword-grade sword-bearers who couldn't see the situation clearly. Under his scolding, these famed sword-grade sword-bearers could only reluctantly put their swords back into their scabbards. Your Majesty, Heavenly Sun, dare I ask, do you really not care about the face of the tens of thousands of sword-bearers in our Yanjing City and want to forcibly shield such a murderer? Sword Immortal Heavenly Sun asked. I am not shielding him. On the contrary, I am doing this for your Yanjing City. Long Shi Jiendi coldly snorted. Shanghai Pass is in a critical situation and urgently needs a large number of genius famed sword-grade sword-bearers. That Ku Rakin was able to become a famed sword-grade sword-bearer within a year, synchronized with the King of Yu's Gojin sword, and is also the direct descendant of Sword Immortal White Colt. I am not unconditionally exonerating or shielding him. I have already issued an imperial decree that it is enough for others to fight in Shanghai Pass for 3 years, but he, Ku Rakin, must fight in Shanghai Pass for a full 30 years. If he does not die within 30 years, then I will pardon his sins and let him come out with a clean record. Long Shi Jiendi let out a long sigh, but this is 30 years. Not to mention that the probability of him surviving within these 30 years is less than 5%, this is the most glorious 30 years of his life. For him to waste it in this hopeless situation of Shanghai Pass is already the greatest punishment. Is this not enough? Actually, I want to give Shanghai Pass a chance, give Yanjing City a chance, give this kid a chance, and at the same time give Sword Immortal White Colt, who sacrificed himself for humanity, a chance. Let him atone for his crimes in Shanghai Pass. Even if he dies, he should die on the battlefield against Yuan Ko, rather than wasting our human bullet. I remember that when you were young, Sword Immortal Heavenly Son, you and Sword Immortal White Colt were teammates for a few years, and were even sworn brothers. Could it be that you are going to helplessly watch Sword Immortal White Colt's last bloodline be severed? These 2 paragraphs of Long Jiandi's previous tough style were replaced with a touch of gentleness. Just as Long Jiandi had said, fighting in Shanhai Pass for 30 years was indeed more painful than death. From a purely criminal point of view, it was no less than a death sentence. In comparison, letting Ku Rakin fight in Shanhai Pass was indeed more practical than simply wasting bullet. In addition, Ku Rakin's father, Zhu Wudao, had perished together with the Creator's Godhead for the sake of humanity. He had used his own life to prevent the Creator's Godhead from exploding, thus saving the lives of 3,000 Yuzhong City's elite sword-bearers. With such a meritorious deed bestowed upon Ku Rakin, no matter how one looked at it, his punishment should be reduced. But Tian Hen was also a hero of our Yanjing City, yet he was killed by Yuan Ko for no reason at all. If we let Ku Rakin off just like that, Tian Hen's spirit in heaven. It was clear that Sword Immortal Heavenly Son still didn't want to let Ku Rakin off just like that. Senior Heavenly Son, I hope you can watch this video about this matter. The sword spirit of Gui Hall, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke. Then, everyone heard a crisp sound from Sword Immortal Heavenly Son's personal terminal. I've sent the video to you. I think this video will clearly prove who killed Sword Immortal Tian Hen. Sword Immortal Heavenly Son closed his eyes. Clearly, he was directly using his brain to read the video on his personal terminal. About 2 to 3 minutes later, the video finished playing, and Sword Immortal Heavenly Son opened his eyes again. However, this time, Sword Immortal Heavenly Son's eyes were no longer filled with anger. Instead, there was a hint of doubt. That's impossible. Tian Hen's immortal grade sword mistress has already fallen into a deep slumber. How could she appear in the video and describe what happened during the battle? It turned out that Sword Immortal Heavenly Son was watching a video of Sword Immortal Tian Hen's immortal grade sword mistress. In the video, Sword Immortal Tian Hen's sword mistress very clearly described how Sword Immortal Tian Hen had fought Zhu Luren, how he had defeated Sha Sha, and the fact that if he had tried to devour Sha Sha's divinity, he would have died to the divinity. This was because Sword Immortal Tian Hen would never lie about something as important as this. Therefore, if this was really what Sword Immortal Tian Hen's immortal grade sword mistress had said, then it could be confirmed that this was the truth. However, the problem was that Sword Immortal Tian Hen was already dead, and all of his sword mistresses had fallen into a deep slumber. How could this video have been recorded? Chapter 842. Senior Skyson, this video definitely has something to do with me. The Saintess of Jerusalem, Ashma, who had been sitting among the sword-bearers without saying a word, stood up and said, "There is someone that Ashma can't refuse. He wants me to do him a small favor by using my ancient sword Maiden sword to summon a sword maiden in her previous state." After hearing Ashma's explanation, Sword Immortal Skyson finally understood. It turned out that the sword maiden in the video wasn't the real sword maiden. Instead, it was the sword maiden that Ashima had summoned using her ancient sword Maiden sword maiden. It was the sword maiden that had experienced the entire battle a few days ago. Therefore, even though the real sword maiden of Sword Immortal Tian Hen was still asleep in the sword tower, Ashma could still appear in front of the camera to record the video and tell the truth. At the same time, because this sword maiden was summoned by the sword maiden, the possibility of her lying was directly reduced to zero. This was because the sword maiden summoned by the sword maiden basically had zero EQ. Even if you ordered her to lie, she would not speak. She would only tell the truth about her memories. Therefore, the sword maiden in the video was definitely telling the truth. There was no way she could fake it. No wonder the staff of the sword tower told me 3 days ago that a sword bearer from Cold City had entered the sword tower, but left without doing anything. So it was you, Ashma, who entered the sword tower to see Sword Immortal Tianhen's Sword Maiden, so that you could use the Sword Maiden to summon her past life. Wuzhang Shifeng added. If the Sword Maiden wanted to summon the past life of the Sword Maiden, she had to see her real body with her own eyes. Therefore, Ashma had to make a trip to the Sword Tower. Wuzhang Shifeng's words also indirectly proved the truth of this matter. I'm very curious. Who is so important that the Saintess of Jerusalem personally came to save such a person? Sword Immortal Skysun asked Ashma with a gloomy expression. I'm sorry, Senior Skysun, I can't tell you the answer. Ashma shook her head through the veil and sat back down. I know even if you don't tell me. Sword Immortal Skysun glanced at Long Shijiendi and the Sword Spirit of the Gui Hall. Obviously, he believed that these two were the mysterious people who had asked Ashma to help, because only these two people had the face to ask the Holy Maiden of Jerusalem to help them hide their identities. If that's the case, then Yanjing City has nothing to say. Although Sword Immortal Tianhen's death had a lot to do with Ku Rakin, since he was willing to fight for 30 years in Shanhai Pass to atone for his crimes, then Yanjing City is not willing to waste this bullet. With that, Sword Immortal Skysun left in a hurry with his men. As for Ku Rakin, who had always been a topic of conversation between the two of them, he had never appeared, and no one knew where he was. Father, why did you speak up for Ku Rakin today? Why did you ask me to send people from the Shanhai Pass Dispatching Bureau to forcefully take Ku Rakin away in your name? Why did you do that? After all the sword-bearers had left the conference room, the Sword Spirit of Gui Palace, who had been cooperating with Long Shijiendi, suddenly asked. It seemed that the Sword Spirit of Gui Palace had received orders from Long Shijiendi not long ago to take Ku Rakin away. Little White. Long Shijiendi let out a long sigh. Then, he gently stroked the head of the Sword Spirit of Gui Palace with his big hands. When the Sword Spirit heard the words Little White, he couldn't help but tremble. Obviously, he hated this name. Little White, what do you think of your father as a person? What's wrong with being Jiendi? Long Shijiendi asked. Bad-tempered, selfish, moody, mean, and ungrateful. The Sword Spirit of Gui Palace bluntly pointed out Long Shijiendi's shortcomings, causing Long Shijiendi's face to be filled with embarrassment. Enough. How can you talk about your father like that? Long Shijiendi forcibly interrupted the Sword Spirit of Gui Palace, and then sighed with emotion. But what you said is also the truth. Because of my temperament, your father isn't good in the hearts of others. They don't like me, and some even hate me. Although you have belittled your father and made me worthless, how can your temperament be good? At that time, I strongly opposed you entering the Shanhai Pass Dispatching Bureau, but you insisted on squeezing your way in. In the past 3 years, you have almost offended all the talented youths of the younger generation. Among these talented youths, there are bound to be future Sword Immortals and Jiendi. What do you think your future will be like? Long Shijiendi silently spoke, while the Sword Spirit of Gui Palace silently listened. At this time, the two of them looked like a pair of father and son. I'm not young anymore. It might be 30 years or 20 years. I will eventually ascend. But at that time, you will still be young, and the descendants of our family will be even younger. If those future Sword Immortals and Jiendi have the intention to retaliate against you, what do you think will happen to you? At that time, I will also be a Sword Immortal Jiendi. I don't need to be afraid of them, the Sword Spirit of Gui Palace coldly responded. No, you can't become a Sword Immortal, and you can't become a Jiendi. All of this has already been predestined. You know this better than me. As Long Shijiendi said this, his whole person showed a kind of miserable feeling. From the time you were 3 years old, I knew that you were destined to be a spirit sword-level swordsman. Humph, that's not what you said at that time. You told me that I was destined to be a famous sword-level swordsman for my whole life. However, Didn't I still use my own strength to become a spirit sword-level swordsman? Why do you think that I can't become a sword immortal? Why do you say that I can't ascend the throne and become an emperor? The sword spirit of Gui Palace's emotions suddenly erupted as he loudly questioned Long Shurjindi. Did you really rely on your own strength? Long Shurjindi strangely glared at the sword spirit of Gui Palace. The sword spirit of Gui Palace avoided Long Shurjindi's eyes with a guilty expression that he had never shown before. You are playing with fire. Wuzhang Shifang is also playing with fire, and some people are also playing with fire. I don't know whether the fire will burn me or not, but I know that if the fire really burns you, without Jiandi's help, you will undoubtedly die, just like that arrogant Tian Hen. Our family will also end up like the heaven-shrouding family because of people like you. The dignified heaven-shrouding Jiandi's descendant actually ended up worse than a dog, living like an animal. But the heaven-shrouding family can at least live like animals, but whether our Longshire family can still exist in this world is still a problem. Even if I die without a corpse, I still have to do this. The sword spirit stubbornly straightened his back. Dying is better than being a dog. Then go ahead and do it. Otherwise, why do you think I did this when I clearly saw through all your plans and even pushed Anna into the fire pit? Now I don't even know if she's dead or alive. Long Shurjindi patted the shoulder of the sword spirit of Gui Palace. Don't worry and do it. I have already asked for a favor from you. A future Jiendi has already promised me that no matter what kind of crime you commit, he will protect your life. At the very least, he will protect our family's bloodline. So don't worry and do it. I have already paved the way for you. Dad, are you crazy? Even that lunatic Wuzhang Shifang doesn't dare to say that he can ascend to the throne in the future. How can you say that you will get a favor from a future Jiendi? The sword spirit of Gui Palace asked in confusion. You don't have to worry about this. Dad said that the future Jiendi is the future Jiendi. In fact, Dad is also looking forward to it. If you really succeed, then our Longshire family will be immortal. Then Dad, why don't you join us? The sword spirit of Gui Palace looked at his father. If you are willing to join us, then our plan will be even more guaranteed. I can't join you. Longshire Jiendi shook his head. I am Jiendi, the last pillar of humanity. I will never join a plan that uses the future of humanity as an experiment. Don't forget that the Liunian family is secretly controlling everything. I even suspect that your plan has been completely grasped by the Liunian family. What? We are obviously very secretive. It is impossible for the Liunian family to know. For the first time, the sword spirit of Gui Palace showed an expression of fear. It was as if the Liunian family represented a terrifying monster. Didn't you also hide it from me? But didn't I know everything about your plan? Long Shurjindi smiled. Even I can understand your plan, let alone the Liunian family that has been operating in this world for 1,000 years. Don't think that you can hide anything from them. You are just burying your head in the sand. Then what should we do? The sword spirit of Gui Palace started trembling in fear. If the Liunian family tries to stop us, then I'm afraid we will all. What are you worried about? If the Liunian family really wanted to stop you, they would have done it long ago. Why would they wait until now? You have already completed half of your plan? Jiendi rubbed his son's head. Don't worry. The Liunian family is also looking forward to change. Perhaps they are disgusted with the 1,000 years of stagnation. They also want to know if humans can truly be freed after your plan succeeds. They want to be freed from the 1,000 years of endless battles and return to the happy era of exams and work. When Gohan and the others came out of the White Jade Jing of the Sword Committee headquarters, there was already a large maglev bus waiting in the parking lot of the White Jade Jing. This bus was obviously prepared for Gohan and the other famous sword bearers. After leaving the White Jade Jing, they boarded the bus and went straight to Shanghai Pass. They did not even stop for a moment. This bus seemed to be similar to the Eagle Cat Sword Spirit's bus. There were individual doors in the bus, and each door led to an individual room. However, it was different from the Eagle Cat Sword Spirit's maglev bus that Gohan had taken before. The Eagle Cat Sword Spirit's bus was similar to an RV modified. There were no changes in the space. However, these two buses had a space folding system, just like Gohan's droplet flying car. It looked like a small door, but when it opened, it revealed a large room that was about 30 square meters. There were 25 such large rooms in the 20-meter-long maglev bus. Thank you. When Gohan opened the room with his name written on it, he saw a shiny bald head in front of him. Chapter 843. In Gohan's memory, this should be the first time in history that Zhuluren bowed to him to express his gratitude. At least, this arrogant teenager was not stupid. He knew who had secretly helped him out of the prison where he would surely die. Don't thank me so quickly. Wait until you walk out of Shanghai Pass alive in 30 years. Gohan waved his hand and looked at Ku Rakin's bald head. What happened to your hair? Could it be those guys from Yanjing City? No, I just shaved it off myself. Ku Rakin touched his bald head subconsciously. I will grow my hair again when I meet my Shasha again. Boring, Gohan said and sat on a bed with his name written on it. Gohan noticed that there were a total of 4 beds in this room. It seemed like 4 people would be sleeping in this room tonight. In addition to Zhulvren, who was already here, 2 more people would join this room. Soon, Gohan knew who they were. Harry Changrua and Andreevich walked in side by side. It seemed like they were Gohan's temporary roommates tonight. Sir Gohan. Harry Changrua jumped up in surprise when he saw Gohan in the room. He wanted to get intimate with Gohan but was stopped by Gohan. Your bed is over there, Gohan said calmly. Wait, why are there 5 people in this room? Andreevich, who had never spoken to Gohan, looked around the room and was surprised to find that there was a 5th person in the room where there should only be 4 people. The 5th person was naturally none other than the extra Gu Xuanwu. My cousin joined us temporarily, so the Sword Spirit didn't arrange a room for her. She could only stay with me. Gohan's words seemed reasonable, but in fact, the Sword Spirit had sent a message to Gohan to inform Gohan that the Sword Spirit had arranged a room for Gu Xuanwu in Liuyan Ling's room. However, how could Gohan let Gu Xuanwu stay in another room? Who knew if this girl, who knew little about the human world, would say something strange to Liuyan Ling and expose Gohan's secret? However, since Gu Xuanwu had appeared in front of everyone as a human, Gohan couldn't force her into his dimensional pocket. In the end, Gohan had no choice but to let Gu Xuanwu lie on the same bed as him and use this method to control Gu Xuanwu's big mouth. As Gohan's words made sense, Andreevich didn't question it anymore. If Gohan observed Andreevich's eyes carefully, he would realize that there was something wrong with them. He looked at Gu Xuanwu as though there was a burning flame hidden in his eyes. Especially when he saw Gohan forcefully hugging Gu Xuanwu and lying on the same bed, his eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. Andreevich even clenched his fists, as though he was going to punch Gohan at any time. Of course, Andreevich held back in the end. After all, they were cousins. It was none of his business that they were sleeping on the same bed. Damn you! Do you really think you are my father? Who wants to sleep on the same bed with a pervert like you? The bed was a single bed. It was more spacious when one person was lying on it, but it was more compact when 2 people were lying on it. More importantly, Gu Xuanwu's behavior was very dishonest. He constantly struggled and wanted to leave Gohan's side. If you want me to see your mother, then you should obediently sleep. If something goes wrong, I won't take any responsibility. Gohan's words made Gu Xuanwu suddenly become a lot more honest. He didn't struggle anymore, but from time to time, he would use his 2 fingers to pinch Gohan's flesh. Unfortunately, no matter how hard Gu Xuanwu tried, Gohan always had a calm expression, as if Gu Xuanwu was not pinching his own flesh. I'm warning you, you are absolutely not allowed to touch me. Otherwise, Bai Tai will ruthlessly stab you with his sword. Do you understand? Gu Xuanwu fiercely threatened. Qin Pin, come out for a moment. It wasn't a good idea to let Gu Xuanwu toss and turn like this, so Gohan brought out the versatile Qin Pin. Ever since Qin Pin drank a cup of snake bile from the 3-foot sword and fainted, he hadn't recovered from the dizziness. Therefore, in the following battle, Qin Pin was very quiet and didn't come out to cause trouble. Instead, he obediently stayed in the scabbard and slept. Therefore, when Gohan once again pulled out Qin Pin from the scabbard, Qin Pin was still drooling as he slept, but his eyebrows and nose were still wrinkled. Obviously, he was still savoring the delicious golden prajna snake bile. This is the Qin Pin sword. Gohan placed Qin Pin in between him and Gu Xuanwu. With Qin Pin between us, you don't have to worry about me plotting against you. It seemed like Gohan was using Qin Pin as a human isolator. However, this was indeed a good idea, because among all of Gohan's sword ladies, Gu Xuanwu was the least against Qin Pin. She was also willing to sleep with Qin Pin. Sure enough, when Gu Xuanwu saw Qin Pin, this person quieted down a lot. He no longer licked Gohan's flesh, but buried his face deep into Qin Pin's body, reveling in the milky fragrance on Qin Pin's body. Hey, are you asleep? Gohan had just closed his eyes when he heard Gu Xuanwu ask him this question. Ask what you want to ask. Gohan said. I'm a little scared. Gu Xuanwu, who was originally lively, suddenly became a little depressed. I've been out for almost a month. I don't know if my mother is doing well in the amusement park. I secretly escaped without her knowing. Will she drag her seriously ill body to look for me? There was a saying that went, the closer you are to home, the more timid you are. They were about to go home, and Gu Xuanwu suddenly began to be afraid. Maybe not. Gohan said faintly. Go to sleep. No matter what, you have to face it. When you go home, you will know what will happen. Although they were on a floating bus, and the 3 of them were squeezed on a bed, Gohan slept surprisingly comfortably. It was not until he suddenly heard a shrill chirping sound in his ears that Gohan woke up from his sleep. Gohan, wake up! We have arrived at Shanghai Pass. Harry Changrua said to Gohan. Are you nervous? Gohan looked at Harry Changrua. No. How do you see me nervous? I'm not nervous at all. Harry Changrua's voice was a little intermittent. Then you should pay attention to your own buttons. Gohan pointed at Harry Changrua's clothes. Only then did Harry Changrua realize that the bottom button of his clothes was on the 3rd buttonhole, and then it was all buttoned up in a mess. The clothes looked very awkward on his body. I'm sorry. Harry Changrua's face turned red, and then ran back to his bed like a little girl and began to put on his clothes again. Gohan also patted Qin Pin's little face, and found that this cute girl who had slept for almost 24 hours still had no intention of waking up. He simply stopped waking her and put her back into the scabbard. Gu Xuanwu was nowhere to be found, and when Gohan opened his eyes, he did not see the girl's shadow. Come, time to eat. Just as Gohan was about to look for Gu Xuanwu, the girl opened the door and walked in with a big plate of steamed buns. Andreevich followed behind Gu Xuanwu. This kid laughed happily, and in his hand was a big pot of steamed porridge. Everyone, it's time to eat. I specially went to prepare this for everyone. It turned out that Gu Xuanwu had actually gone to get breakfast. Because they came out in a hurry, most of the sword bearers did not prepare a lot of food in their dimensional pockets like they usually did when they went out. Therefore, the Gue Palace Sword Spirit was in charge of breakfast. As for lunch and dinner in the future, the Shanghai Pass Management Committee would be responsible for it, so Gohan and the other sword bearers did not need to worry about food. Come, my good brother, this is for you. Gu Xuanwu brought 3 big steamed buns to Gohan, and Andreevich also filled a bowl with porridge and brought it to Gohan. When did these 2 get together? One was holding the steamed buns, and the other was delivering porridge. Gohan thought silently. All of a sudden, the number of people in the room had tripled, because all the sword bearers had released their sword ladies. After all, sword ladies also needed to eat. The bus has entered the Zhou-Tian star formation. All sword bearers, please get ready and pack your belongings. Get off the bus in an orderly manner and head to the Shanghai Pass Tower to await the Shanghai Pass Management Committee's battle allocation. The voice of the Gui Palace sword spirit was heard from the bus's broadcast. Gohan conveniently threw the remaining steamed buns into his dimensional pocket and distributed them to the sword ladies in his pocket. Because Gohan could not release all 6 of his sword ladies, he still had 3 sword ladies who had not eaten yet. Therefore, Gohan could only rely on this little trick to deliver food to the sword ladies. It seemed like it was a little tragic to be Gohan's sword lady. Chapter 844. This is the Zhou-Tian Star Big Battle Formation. After getting off the hover bus and standing on the ground under the sunlight, everyone began to tremble from the bottom of their hearts as they looked at the huge Zhou-Tian Star Big Battle Formation in front of them. This Zhou-Tian Star Big Battle Formation was simply too spectacular. Looking at the Zhou-Tian Star Big Battle Formation from the outside, it felt like a huge black iron pot had been placed upside down on the ground, covering the entire northeast region. Inside the iron pot, countless stars could be seen shining, as if the entire starry sky had been put into the iron pot. At the outermost edge of the iron pot, there was a huge city wall that stretched as far as the eye could see. Whether it was in terms of height or length, this city wall seemed to have surpassed the strength of the outermost city wall of Yanjing City. This city wall only had a city gate in front of the hover bus, and the huge words, Shanghai Pass, were engraved on the city wall. Looking up from the city wall, one could see the starry sky inside the iron pot, as well as the stars that filled the sky. There were many stars in the iron pot, but the most eye-catching and brightest stars were the 2 stars that were located at the eyes of the Tai Chi Yin and Yang diagram of the iron pot. One of the stars was shining with a red light, while the other one was shining with a bluish-yellow light. These 2 stars were the eyes of the Zhou-Tian Star Big Battle Formation, the Taiyin Star and the Taiyang Star, which were the sun and the moon in the traditional sense. The Taiyang Star and the Taiyin Star were the absolute eyes of the Zhou-Tian Star Big Battle Formation, and they were also the key to suppressing the entire formation. Once either of these 2 stars was broken, the entire Zhou-Tian Star Big Battle Formation would instantly disappear, and the 12 Zhu Wu and the Wu people, who had been suppressed by humans for hundreds of years, would also spurt out and launch the most deadly revenge on humans. Now, Wu people were besieging the sun. Gohan could vaguely see some tiny lights that were only about a pixel shining around the sun. This did not seem like a big deal, but Gohan knew that every flash of light represented an intense battle that was going on. The battle on the sun had probably reached its climax. Inside the Zhou-Tian Star Battle Formation, other than the extreme Yang Star and the extreme Yin Star, there were 7 other stars that were only slightly brighter than the extreme Yang Star and the extreme Yin Star. They represented the Myrtle Imperial Star, the Tai Wei Imperial Star, the Tian Shi Imperial Star, the Azure Dragon in the east, the Vermilion Bird in the south, the Baihu in the west, and the Black Tortoise in the north. In addition to these 7 stars, there were 365 stars the size of jelly beans. According to their brightness, they belonged to the 3rd level of the Zhou-Tian Star Battle Formation. This was the guest star of the Zhou-Tian Star Battle Formation. Finally, there were the most numerous tiny stars in the Zhou-Tian Star Battle Formation. They were also called microstars. This was the most fundamental power of the Zhou-Tian Star Battle Formation. It represented 14,800 mini Zhou-Tian star banners and 14,800 ancient sword bearers. Speaking of these ancient sword bearers, It was said that the sword spirit of the Gui Hall had temporarily gathered 3,000 ancient sword bearers in Yanjing City. The 7 main stars controlled 365 guest stars and 14,800 microstars. They were the backbone of the Zhou Tian star battle formation. If more than 3 of the 7 main stars were lost, it would mean that the heavenly cycle star formation would be destroyed in an instant. Alright, you can personally experience the existence of these stars later. However, you must immediately enter the Zhou Tian star battle formation and join the battle to defend the sun. The sword spirit of Gui Palace, who was the last to get off the carriage, said to all the reinforcements. Then, the sword spirit of Black Shop gestured at the heavenly cycle star formation. Suddenly, a small door opened beside the pitch-black city gate of Shanghai Pass. Enter the Zhou Tian star battle formation through this small door. There will be people from the Shanghai Pass Management Committee who will be in charge of assigning tasks to you. After saying this, the sword spirit of the Gui Hall jumped back onto the hover bus. Then, the hover bus drove back to Yanjing City without looking back. What's going on? He just left us here and left by himself? A middle-aged sword-bearer said with a dissatisfied expression. He had been holding back his anger towards the sword spirit of Gui Hall, who had led him to his death. However, he didn't expect the sword spirit to leave after bringing them to the gate of Shanghai Pass. Was he that afraid of death? Don't talk nonsense if you don't know anything, Liu Nianling said coldly. In order to maintain the stability of the Zhou Tian star battle formation, any sword bearer above the spiritual sword level is not allowed to enter the Zhou Tian star battle formation. Otherwise, their power will destroy the basic structure of the Zhou Tian star battle formation and destroy the Zhou Tian star battle formation. Therefore, it's not that the sword spirit doesn't want to go in with us, but he can't. The sword spirit of the Gui Hall has been fighting in Shanghai Pass for 6 years. Why would he be afraid of this place? Liu Nianling's words made the middle-aged sword bearer speechless. He could only smile awkwardly. Moreover, the sword spirit of the Gui Hall has more important things to do. Not only did the famed sword bearers suffer heavy casualties, but more than 3,000 ancient sword bearers have also died. Since this morning, Yanjing City has mobilized all of its ancient sword rank sword bearers to participate in the battle. Therefore, the sword spirit of Gui Hall must rush back to Yanjing City and bring the ancient sword rank sword bearers here tomorrow morning. Liu Nianling's words made everyone's heart sink. They didn't expect that more than 3,000 ancient sword bearers had died. Moreover, more ancient sword bearers would be coming to Shanghai Pass soon. These famed sword rank sword bearers were far stronger than ancient sword rank sword bearers. Those ancient sword rank sword wielders were fearless enough to fight. If they continued to cower, wouldn't they become the biggest joke in the world? Therefore, the aura of the famed sword bearers instantly increased. Then, under Liu Nianling's lead, they entered the Shanghai Pass through a small door at the bottom of the city wall. They officially entered the Shanghai Pass, which was considered a hopeless place for the sword bearers. After entering the Shanghai Pass, Gu Han and the others first passed through a long and narrow passage that did not contain any light. When everything became clear, Gu Han and the others suddenly found themselves in a large hall. This hall was very simple. There were no fancy decorations. There were only a few chairs in the middle of the hall. On both sides of the hall there were 8 different small doors. Other than the small door that Gu Han and the others used to enter the hall, the other 7 doors seemed to be the exit of the hall. They led to different locations and directions. Above these 7 small doors were the words Z-Wei, Tai Wei, Sky City, Green Dragon, Vermilion Bird, Baihu, and Black Tortoise. These 7 doors seemed to represent the 7 main stars of the Zhou Tian star formation. Andreevich, Harry Chong Ru XXXX. The 17 of you will enter the Green Dragon Gate. There will naturally be people in the Green Dragon Gate who will arrange your tasks for you. A voice came from the hall's broadcast. Andreevich and Harry Chong-Rua seemed to have been assigned together. They looked at each other and then neatly walked toward the door marked with the words, Green Dragon. Ashima, Ladia, the 13 of you will enter the Vermilion Bird Gate. Immediately after, Ashima and Ladia were assigned to the main star of the Vermilion Bird Gate. Gohan, Leslie Dracula, Ku-Rock-in, the 20 of you will enter the Tai-Wei Gate. Next, the mysterious voice assigned Gohan, Leslie Dracula, Ku-Rock-in, and 17 other people together. Hearing this assignment, Gohan frowned on the spot because Gu Xianwu wasn't assigned to the same place as him. This was something that Gohan couldn't accept no matter what. Because if Gohan couldn't be assigned to the same place as Gu Xianwu, it meant that Gohan and Gu Xianwu would be stationed in different areas. Then how would Gohan be able to enter her house through Gu Xianwu? Moreover, if Gu Xianwu didn't have Gohan to watch over her, God knows what she would do. Moreover, there were a lot of other troubles, so Gohan had to be assigned to the same place as Gu Xianwu. This was Gohan's bottom line. I object. Under everyone's astonished gaze, Gohan only used a clear voice to respond to the person in the broadcast. My cousin must be with me. I refuse to be separated from my cousin. The voice in the broadcast was silent for a while. You must listen to the management of our Shanghai Sea Sword Committee Management Committee. You must abide by our assignment. Now, please enter the Tai-Wei Gate immediately. Otherwise, what can you do? What can you do to me? Without waiting for the person to finish, Gohan directly interrupted him. Otherwise, our Shanghai Sea Management Committee will let you know what rules are. The voice in the broadcast was very dignified, but no matter how one listened to this dignified voice, there was a hint of helplessness. It was obvious that the Shanghai Sea Management Committee had not met anyone who dared to disobey their orders for a long time. That's good. Gohan squinted his eyes. Then let me see the rules of your Shanghai Sea Management Committee. I want to see what exactly are the rules. To be able to make me, Gohan, submit. Ignorant. The voice in the broadcast was still dignified. Your actions are provoking the entire human race. You are provoking the dignity of the Sword Committee. We will immediately inform the Yuzhong City Sword Committee to carry out a severe punishment. If necessary, we will even strip you and your family of all privileges. This was the first punishment that the Shanghai Sea Management Committee had for people who dared to provoke them. It had to be said that this punishment was effective in most situations. This was because after the famous sword bearers entered Shanghai Sea, they were most concerned about the fate of their family and whether they were living well. Therefore, when the Shanghai Sea Management Committee mentioned that they would remove the privileges of the family members of the sword bearers, most of the sword bearers would behave. Unfortunately, the Shanghai Sea Management Committee had met a troublesome guy like Gohan. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.